email to publictestimony@newhavenconnecticut.gov before 2 p.m. on the day of the meeting. This meeting may be viewed on the New Haven Board of Alders YouTube page. At this time, I'd like my colleagues to introduce themselves, starting from my right.
Kiana Flores, Ward 1. Sarah Miller, Ward 14. Anna Festa, Ward 10.
Adam Marchand, Ward 25.
Sal Punza, Ward 17.
Ida Smith, Ward 30.
Frank Redenti, Ward 15.
Amy Marks, Ward 26.
I will now turn it over to the Honorable Adam Marchand, Co-Chair and Chair of the Finance Committee.
Thank you, Co-Chair Punzo. Want to also acknowledge Alder Hogan from Ward 28, who is here this evening, Alder Caroline Smith from Ward 9, who is here, and two future colleagues, Alders-elect from Ward 1, Elias Theodore, and from Ward 18, Leland Moore. We're glad to see you this evening. I also want to note that Dr. Joyner, who's one of our elected members of the Board of Education, is here. Other members of the Board of Education team will be up here shortly and will introduce themselves. We're grateful for their presence and for everybody else who's here. I made this announcement already, but I'll make it again, which is on the table to the right. There's a sign-up sheet for members of the public who wish to give testimony this evening. So if you would like to speak, that's where you can sign up. You don't have to sign up if you don't plan to speak. So that's what that is over there. I'll make my usual announcements. If you have a cell phone or a pager or some other electronic device that has a wide variety of ringtones and bleeps and whistles, please turn it off or put it on silent mode. We don't want to be just to have interruptions to our proceedings this evening. If you need to have a conversation with someone, be our guest, but please take that outside. The acoustics in this room are such that if you're talking in the audience, it makes it difficult for us to hear. And we thank you for your cooperation. We have only one item this evening. I also want to recognize Alder Richard Furlow from Ward 27, who has joined us. And also Alder Walker Myers from Ward 23, who has also joined us. Thank you both for being here. So our game plan is pretty straightforward this evening. We have one item, which is to talk about the budget for the New Haven Public Schools, right? And there were a group of alders who submitted a request for this workshop. They have a presentation that they wish to give to this joint committee. They will do that shortly after these announcements are over. And after they do that, if members of our committee have questions, they can ask questions of those folks. After they're done, then we'll hear from representatives from the Board of Education. And they have a presentation, I believe, that they will be giving, so we will be grateful to hear their presentation. Afterwards, members of the Joint Committee will ask questions if they have any. Given the size of this Joint Committee, we're going to limit questions to 3 per alder, at least initially. Kind of depends on how long it takes to get through 2 presentations and a bunch of questions. But we need to be able to get through that so that we can then allow the public to be able to speak as well. So we're going to try to be well organized and disciplined tonight so we can get through both presentations, the questions that folks have, and also hear from members of the public. When we get to the public portion, you will know because we'll announce it, and we'll start reading names from a list of folks who've signed up. When folks come forward to give their testimony, they're invited to give their names and addresses for the record, and then they'll be given 3 minutes to make their remarks. And so that is how we will proceed this evening. Let me see if I have any other notes. Well, yes, one quick note. There are few endeavors undertaken by our city government that are more vital and important than educating our young people. And I think everybody who's here this evening would agree that that is an essential and very important function of our local government. And we care a lot about it. And we want it to be successful. And we want our young people to have an excellent preparation for life. So I think we're all united by that desire. We may have strong opinions that differ about how best that should be done. And we will hear about that too. People are free to express their strong opinions, but we will do it in a way that's respectful of each other. And I'm sure that that will be the case. So, having made those announcements, we'll now proceed with the presentation from the makers of the request to have this workshop. And we would invite them to come face us at the table. And yes, you will have to give your names and addresses for the record, even though we already know those things. I would also, before they introduce themselves, just orient colleagues to the paper that we have in front of us. We have, of course, our agenda, which is just one sheet of paper, but we also have a presentation that's a lot of dark blue ink. It looks very nice. That's the presentation we're about to hear. And then there's also some testimony that came in advance of tonight's meeting that Ms. D, our staff, gave to us, and that's in your packets as well. Having said that, names and addresses for the record, please.
Sarah Miller, 29 Clinton Avenue. Kiana Flores, 261 Park Street.
Caroline Tomby Smith, 45 Nash Street.
Frank Cadenti, 67 Downing Street.
Thank you. We're all ears.
Thank you. I'm going to kick us off this morning. I think the deck is being pulled up by Mr. Lucas as we speak. I just want to start by underscoring what you said, that I think we're all here because we understand the importance of education in our city. We want to see it strengthened as much as possible, and that's a shared commitment of everybody I know. So I just want to start by orienting. We're going to make a quick presentation. This is not an in-depth exercise, but we did think it was important to quickly contextualize the reason that we requested this workshop, the key questions that we have about the budget, and a couple of very simple recommendations for how we might proceed. Are you almost there, Mr. Lucas?
Not yet.
Okay. Well, you all have it, so I will
Please
proceed. So just to take us back in time a little bit, we requested this workshop the day after we voted on the current budget that we're operating under. The four of us made a proposal to reallocate some money to the schools based on the pleas that we heard and that we hear pretty much every budget cycle around the extent of unmet needs in the school system. And that recommendation came out of hearing those needs. We hear concerns about learning and staffing, large classroom sizes, special education needs that far exceed the staff capacity to manage them in the classroom. We hear about maintenance issues, very severe infrastructure and building maintenance challenges, mold, leaks, things that are really health and safety hazards that continue day after day, month after month, year after year. We hear concerns about supplies from educators, in the pocket for basic academic supplies, pencils, paper, toilet paper, and really low inventory on very basic supplies in schools, bathroom doors that don't close, things that really should be unimaginable in our schools in a country like ours, as wealthy as ours, and yet we just keep seeing these issues. So that was the context against which we made the proposal back in May. And hearing the concerns from colleagues about why they didn't want to put that additional funding into the budget because of concerns about the way the budget is managed and communicated and just what we know about it, we thought it would be fruitful to have this workshop and dive in a little bit deeper on what we do and don't know about the budget. So I'll turn over to Kiana. All right, thank you. So just turning over to the next page, of course, like has been highlighted already, very important issue in the city is our education system and how we are raising the next generation. But just factually, it is also a really important topic just because of how much of the education is a part of our city budget. It is the largest spending category, with it being 213 million or around 30% of the overall budget. So that's just to underscore how important it is to have this discussion today. And currently the Board of Education asserts a recurring structural deficit with routine crises and shortfalls like the ones that we just discussed, except in years of federal windfall. And it is, what's currently so is that the Board of Education does not publish an accurate annual line item budget. And like we've said before, this just makes it really difficult to understand what we're spending on, what the gaps are, and what can we do to best support our education system here in New Haven. Some things that become difficult are approvals.
So the Board of Education approves spending without identifying whether it's in the budget, since there is not a detailed budget from which to work off of, to compare budget versus actuals. And it's also difficult to mitigate deficit because the Board of Education appears to lack a mechanism for identifying these line item overages during the year, and thus it's difficult to predict and mitigate deficits in the future. Moving on, without a line item budget, simply it is challenging to determine how to allocate resources effectively to meet these critical unmet needs that we discussed, and it's difficult to validate that funding level as a reason for unmet needs. Until recently, the absence of a line item budget was not named as a problem by the Board of Education, and just highlighting a couple of positions, the mayor has been on the Board of Education for 5 years, the superintendent who's been in office for 2.5 years, and other Board of Education members in the office from 2 to 10 years. And so we really believe that this workshop purpose is to really bring it up as a priority issue. And a lack of understanding and trust in the Board of Education budget really deters our collective ability to move together towards full funding for our schools. So this is not just on the city level, this is really at the state level when it comes to our school district and the ECS formula, which determines, as you know, how much funding we get for our schools. When we think about Yale's investment in the city, having a structured budget would really aid us in being able to meet these gaps. And currently we seek a clear baseline of knowledge to collectively understand how current dollars are allocated and a mechanism to ensure the best transparency, accuracy, and public trust moving forward.
Thank you, Alder Flores. And so on the next page, you can see that as a part of tonight's discussion, we've outlined 3 categories of questions about the Board of Education budget. These are questions that we've heard from residents and taxpayers, educators, neighbors, and others. And again, with these questions, our goals are twofold. 1, to clarify current practices, and 2, identify opportunities to strengthen transparency and accuracy so that we can all have the information that we need to support our schools effectively. And so the first category are questions about a line item budget. Specifically, we have questions about what factors have contributed to New Haven Public Schools not producing a complete published line item budget in recent years that includes things such as all staff positions and their funding sources, all contracted and purchased services, department level and site-based allocations, and a detailed revenue and expenditure categories. Further, in addition, we're interested in questions around internal controls, what internal controls or procedures currently limit New Haven Public Schools' ability to produce this level of detail. And then lastly, just to make sure that we have an understanding of the recommendations that have been made, would New Haven Public Schools share the last 3 years of auditor management letters? The second bucket of questions is about technology and modernization of our budgeting systems and our software, namely Munis. So both the city and the Board of Education use Munis to produce our budgets. And so to better understand how New Haven Public Schools can strengthen its budgeting tools, we have questions around the use of Munis. How does New Haven Public Schools' use of Munis differ from the city's? What prevents the full implementation of key modules such as next year budget and position control? In addition, speaking of modernization, what is New Haven Public Schools' plan to fully modernize budgeting practices that are aligned with municipal standards? And lastly, and quite importantly, is about resources. What staffing or support and or outside expertise does New Haven Public Schools require to complete this modernization within a reasonable time period? And then lastly, our last category of questions are around the line items of other contractual and other purchased services. And so to improve public understanding of these categories, we have 2 questions. 1, about the contracts and services. Will New Haven Public Schools provide a complete vendor list for information accuracy with service descriptions and dollar amounts, and also publish this annually? And in addition, about major cost drivers, such as transportation and others which fall under these categories, could New Haven Public Schools provide the current and projected plans for some of those major cost drivers, things like, again, transportation, busing, with associated timelines and financial impacts?
And as part of this, we came up with 2 recommendations. Recommendation 1 would be for New Haven Public Schools to publish a baseline line item budget. And recommendation 2, to establish budget transparency working group. As far as recommendation 1 and the line item budget, the line item budget we believe should be built into Munis, come complete with a staff roster tied to the payroll and funding sources, as also with the full list of the contracted services, purchase services with vendor names, descriptions, and dollar amounts, with the department level and site-specific allocations. Part 2 of that recommendation would also be a staffing sustainability plan to identify the positions currently supported by expiring grants, and to include scenarios for maintaining the critical capacity. And then a monthly statement of activity with budgets versus actuals.
Thank you, Alder Dente. And lastly, our second recommendation is for the Board of Alders to create a budget transparency working group. This would be a collaborative body that includes representatives from the Board of Alders, the Board of Education, educators, families, and resident taxpayers. And the purpose of this group would be to review the district's line item budget that would be published, examine revenue and expense line items, discuss the Munis implementation and financial controls, as well as analyze contracts and procurement processes, staff composition, and support the early detection and mitigation of deficits. And the idea for this is that it's a proactive step and one that could allow us to strengthen partnership. And I think just finally, in conclusion, I want to echo what Chair Marchand said. Thank you to each of you. Every single person in this room cares about our children in the city, and thank you for your partnership, and we look forward to the discussion.
Thank you very much for that. And I think probably most of the questions tonight will be for the Board of Education representatives, but now's the time for questions from colleagues of our colleagues on the other side of the table who made the request for this workshop. Questions from colleagues for our friends across the table. Seeing none, I think that's a reflection of the fact that it was clear and that we're probably very eager to hear from the Board of Ed. So thank you so much for your presentation. We invite those of you on the Joint Committee to return to this side of the table. And we will now invite forward the team from the New Haven Public Schools who are going to come and speak to us. And when you are settled, let's pass out the paper. Yes, indeed. Take a moment to pass out the paper. Okay. If you have extras, you'll just give them to our staff. Yep. First is put them up there. I want to thank you also that this presentation has page numbers. That's something that I'm always keen to have. Everybody has what they need?
No.
Okay. We're good. Everybody have one? Okay, thank you. So welcome, names and addresses for the record, please.
Sure. Good evening, everybody. Dr. Madeline Lebron, Superintendent, 70 Cabot Street, New York, Connecticut.
Mr. Hernandez, Chief Financial Officer, Bakery Freeman, Health, Connecticut.
Good evening, Dr. Paul White, 170 Osborne Avenue, Chief of School Operations.
Thank you very much. We are all ears.
Okay. Well, thank you again for the opportunity. I want to thank the members of my team who are also here in the audience, and Dr. Joyner, our elected board member. Before we begin, I just want to go back in time a little bit. And you may recall that somebody referenced my year in a row. During my year one, as part of my entry plan, I elicited the input of all of our stakeholders to be able to arrive at defining what should be our priorities for the district. And I want to point out that as part of the path to excellence, we named operational efficiencies as one of the key priorities for us, because we understood, right, that there were some strengths and there were significant areas of opportunities. And as part of that strategy that was named in the path to excellence is the strategy around collectively advocating and aligning resources so that we may achieve equity across all of our schools and our programs. And I know that that was a reference at the beginning, that ultimately that's what we're here for. We are all aligned in what it is that we are seeking, which is to ensure that our students have the high quality public education that they so deserve. And that is why we must make sure that we are aligning and advocating for the resources to make sure that we are able to make that promise a reality. You also saw, because a lot of this has been work in progress, that as we opened up this budget process, in listening to the call and responding to the call in which we are aligned, that we said that this year's budget process would be done completely different, because we want to ensure that we are being guided, all of us, by one central goal, and that is to create a process that is transparent. At the end of the day, that's what we all want. We want transparency, we want to be an open book, we want the entire public to understand the reality of our funding situation and the reality of the struggle that we go through year after year, trying to stretch every single dollar to ensure again that we're giving our students the best possible program. And I hope that you saw, and that some of you hopefully participated, that we opened up that process this year by leveraging a tool that proved effective when we built the plan, that is our thought exchange, and grateful that already 1,907 people engaged in that process. So we are starting this year with the voice of our stakeholders at the center. And by that meaning, for students, or parents, or teachers, or paraeducators, or administrators, or central office people, or community, because all of us make up that collective. So I just wanted to reiterate again that we are all aiming for the same thing. So I am grateful that we are still aligned in what it is that we are seeking for.
I'm going to interrupt you right there, because it's a good place to welcome Alder Morrison, who has joined us.
Good evening.
Please continue.
On the next slide, and I'm going to be turning it over to our Chief Financial Officer, as part of what we heard in the presentation, the previous presentation, there was a reference, right, to the significant challenges that come with funding year after year. So I wanted to bring back and offer a historical perspective. So again, that we're being transparent and we're being open. So here, you will see, you have fiscal year starting from 16 all the way to 26. So giving you a decade of where we have been. You have the requests that the Board of Ed had made in that particular year, identifying what was needed to be able to ensure that we were providing again and had the staff to provide the program for our students along with everything else. You have the budget that was approved. You have the difference, and then you have where we ended in the year, every year trying to mitigate the gap, the difference that has happened for 10 years. So I do want to point out, because I believe it was also not mentioned explicitly, but in between, that you will see that there were years in which the mitigation has been easier to do. And I want to point out that let's go back to COVID years, and you will see there in our actuals that at that time, it got easier for the district to be able to completely balance out books. Why? Because millions of dollars came from the feds. And the millions of dollars allowed to be able to continue to mitigate the practice that happens every single year in this district. Did I miss anything on slide number 4? With that now, with that history, the context, we are here based on what we received as an agenda to speak about, right, what happened last year, where we ended, how did we mitigate, where are we now, how are we mitigating, right? So I want to make sure that I'm sticking to what you asked for, and now I'm turning it over to CFO Hernandez.
Oh, good evening, and thank you for having us here. The only one thing I will add to that slide may be that my thought process when I think about the finances of the Board of Ed is that this is a revenue problem, not an expense problem. And slide number 4, speaks to it, because as you see, when you have more revenue, especially in those years of ESSER funding, you're able to mitigate, you're able to provide, the services that you asked for, that that the children need in a school district. So this is a revenue problem, not an expense problem. And oftentimes we're talking about the Board of Ed as if there's an expense problem. And yes, there's inflation, there's expenses keep growing, every costs are going up. There's no doubt about that, but that's not just the Board of Ed. That's every department in the city, that's in your household, that's everywhere. The problem here is revenue. And when you think about it, even in our own lives, you're asking for raises at your job. You're asking for, I want to grow because I need to sustain the expenses, right? Electricity is going up, all these things are going up. So you're looking for more revenue in order for you to sustain. The Board of Ed is no different. Expenses are going up. We're looking for more revenue to sustain those expenses. And when you look at the historical, data that we provided on slide number 4, it speaks to that when you see that when we got more revenue during ESSER funding, we were able to achieve all the goals and all the expenses that we detailed during the budget request process. So I want to just start with that because that's the mindset that I'm working with. At the same time that I'm also looking at where can we cut, where can we be more efficient? Because although there's not an expense problem, there is an expense growing, and I want to be able to mitigate as much as possible because there's no revenue to cover it. Now, when you look at slide number 5, I wanted to focus on last year. That's the year that I just came in as we were just closing that year, but I spent enough time to know exactly how it kind of transpired. When you look at fiscal year 25, we ended up with a $4.9 million deficit. And you know that because you were gracious enough to provide $3 million, from the balance fund, moved to the general fund to cover a portion of that deficit, and the other 1.9 was covered with surpluses from other departments. And you guys approved that. I think it was in your October meeting, I believe. You approved that transfer of funding. So, we ended up with a $4.9 million deficit, but at the beginning, based on the budget request that was made by our predecessor, there was an $11.8 million deficit that was projected based on the request. So when you look at $11.8 million deficit that was projected at the beginning when we made the request to the city, to end up with a $4.9 million, it's not such a bad deal. However, $4.9 million deficit is still not good. We don't want to finish in a deficit, but when you have an $11.8 million deficit at the beginning, and then you start mitigating and you start working, with every single department to try to, decrease your cost, find revenue, extra revenue, and you end up with a 4.9, that is progress. That is not the kind of progress that I want to see. I want to see progress that takes all the way to 0. That is the goal. But I do want to start with the fact that progress has been made in mitigating the expenses, and that is not going to stop. What you're going to see this year is going to be more of that, hopefully to the point that it will be to our satisfaction. When you look at slide number 6 speaks to the mitigation plan that was put in place to reduce that $11.8 million from last year. Again, I'm speaking from the historical perspective. I wasn't here, but I do know that this was the plan, and we have a similar plan for this year as well. And this is kind of like more, I don't want to speak to it too much because this is already last year. I will speak to the actuals. $11.8 million, this is the plan that was put in place to mitigate that deficit. And we were able to achieve just a little bit more than half of that by finishing with a 4.9 as opposed to $11.8 million. On the next slide, this slide I'm a little bit more familiar with because I presented this on our September meeting at the Financial Committee's Operations and Committee. This is the year end for FY25. This report, when I put this report together, it was my first report that I put together, my first financial. And I looked at this financial and I said, okay, we have $208 million approved budget. We're gonna finish with $230 million expenses. That's about a $5 million deficit. That's the 4.9 that I've been referring to. At that point, by the point I came in, there was not much I could do. It was already another fiscal year. But I started looking at every single line item and understanding what created this deficit. And obviously, transportation is the biggest that line item that creates this issue. And then I started trying to understand and learn a little bit more about what can we do about transportation that could help us, mitigate this deficit or at least avoid this kind of deficit happening again in the future. And that was my task at the beginning, understanding the line items, understanding the dynamics between special funds and general funds. And that was something that when I started talking about it during our board, it was very interesting to see the reaction, not only of the board members, but also of my colleagues, understanding the dynamics between special funds and general funds. And we don't talk enough about it. So I'll make my commitment to speak more about it. The dynamics between those two and how they interact with each other and how they impact each other. And I think that that's important to speak about, to understand how you have a plan with the general funds, you have a plan with special funds, but when they start interacting with each other the way that they do, because they serve the same population in the same building, oftentimes we have to allocate expenses split between the two, then you start seeing how one affects the other. And that's a very interesting concept to understand before we start making assumptions that we're going the wrong way, we're going the right way. We have to understand those dynamics. So this slide number 7, it's something that you have already seen in the past. I provided this in the September meeting, and it's been out there. This is our year-end report. On slide number 8, now we're moving on to this year. And for some of you, this year seems to be even more important, of course, because we still have some more months to go before the end of the year. We have some opportunities that we're taking advantage of. So this year, I want to remind this body that we started asking $231.5 million in order for us to cover all of our expenses. It seems like when we're having conversations with other stakeholders, that fact seems to be forgotten. We asked for $231.5 million because that's exactly what we needed. And we have a detailed budget that explains why we needed $231.5 million. Of course, we understand, that getting another $25, $30 million, it's not an easy task. And obviously, after you make that ask, you're not going to get it all. You're going to get, what you're going to get, and you hope to get as close as possible. And then you start preparing your mitigation plan. The mayor with this body was able to allocate another $5 million to our budget, and that increased our budget from $208 million to $230 million. $230 million happens to be how we ended last year in expenses. And you will say, well, Amilcar, if you ended up with $230 million last year in expenses, now you have $230 million. You should be able to be just fine, with the exception that there are expense cost drivers that are playing into this. Every single teacher got raises. Paraprofessionals, paraeducators got raises. Administrators, pretty much more than half of our full-time staff got raises. In addition to that, costs are going up. Everywhere you look at, utilities are going up, transportation costs are going up, everything is going up. So compare one year to the other, you have to take into account the fact that expenses continue to go up. Not to our control, other factors outside of our control are influencing the cost of our expenses. And that is absolutely nothing we could do about it, except just to absorb the cost and figure out how to make it work with the same amount of money or less. So that slide there is just to open up this conversation about FY26 from the right point of view. We asked for $231 million, we got $230 million. That gap, it's important for us to take into account. So that gap is about $18.3 million, because now I'm taking into account the $5 million additional that were allotted to us. So now instead of 23.2, which is what you see on slide number 9, Now we're talking about 18.2 if I take into account the $5 million increase in the budget. But before we knew about that $5 million, this mitigation plan had already been put in place. So let's assume that that $5 million is not there yet, and that's why it's one of the first items there. We were hoping to receive that $5 million, and we did. So we started with $23.2 million deficit. Then it went down to 18.2 after we got the $5 million approval on the mayor's budget. And then after that, everything else you see here are things that that we're hoping. I mean, most of it already happened, and some of them we're still in progress to see the how much we achieve of those savings. So here, I don't need to go one by one. You've seen this. If you've seen many of our presentations, you've seen this sheet. We have some revenue on the left side. We did get the special education support from the state, the excess cost, the $5 million. On the second block, you see there's some reductions. Some of these, if you want more details, I mean, Dr. White can speak to some of these costs that we are seeing already happening. I can speak about the contract services. We implemented a contract vetting committee. We meet every Friday, every week, faithfully. Every Friday we meet in the afternoon. There's a committee of 4 of us, including myself, 2 assistant superintendents, and 1 of the directors. The 4 of us, we meet every Friday. It's a contract vetting committee. It's a new committee that we created internally to vet every single contract before it goes to FNO. So every contract, outside of facility contracts, every contract goes to this vetting committee first. We vet the contract, not only to check the amount, and just check to make sure that the expense is reasonable, the cost is reasonable, but also to make sure it's also in alignment with the SOP, the strategic operation plan. We have to make sure that everything is in alignment before it goes to FNO. What was happening in the past was that these contracts were being submitted to FNO, and oftentimes leadership didn't get a chance to vet the contract to vet the contract to the deepest level possible, right? They will know sometimes what it is about, but not the details. Sometimes they didn't even know about it, and it would just be submitted from a principal or any director or any department directly to FNO. And by the time leadership got to see it, it was already on the board, and there was not a lot that we could do at that point, because then the FNO would approve it, and then it would just go on and on. So what we did is that we created this committee to be ahead of those steps, to make sure that internally we're able to see it, to make sure that the supervisor or the leader that supervises that particular program is aware of that contract. So now if a principal is submitting an agreement to FNO, the principal now is not even able to submit it to us. The principal has to submit it to the assistant superintendent, who will then submit it to us. That will assure that we have a cabinet member that is aware of the agreement, knows the details, has seen all the details, because they have to submit a packet with the memo, with all the details, the abstract, before it comes to us. So that gives us some assurances that leadership has seen the contract before we then vet the contract and then go to our review. So that's one of the areas that we are putting into place, because we hope that by doing this, we're able to find $1.5 million in savings. Most of these may happen on the second half of the year, which is when we're going to see most of the contracts, coming through. We have already seen some savings already by asking directors to take, let's say, 5 contracts for 5 different after-school programs from the same vendor, and ask them to combine them into one, and then create that, more volume into one contract, and then give us some savings. We're able to do that, and we're able to push back now and start formalizing the process better, where we can get more for less. And we're starting seeing that now. It's going to start trickling down, and in the future, I'll be able to start, providing some numbers about how much savings have we seen out of that 1.5. Right now, it's a little bit too early. We started the contract vetting committee the first week of October, and we are just kind of like getting to that rhythm now, where we are now seeing more agreements going through. So the more volume we have, the more opportunities we have now to yield some savings. And then on the third column, we see the right sizing. This honestly started by how many people are we going to lay off, until we were able to find enough vacancies and enough spaces in different schools and different areas to right size and move people around in order to provide the savings that we needed to mitigate this without having to lay off a single person. So the third one, and I'll reemphasize this because it's very important. This is the second right sizing in 2 years. I assure you, based on what I've seen, and I was part of this right sizing, I was part of this mitigation plan, there's no more right sizing to do. There's no more right sizing to do. There's absolutely no other way that we could do any more right sizing. So now we're talking about another level. And I don't want to get there. And that's why we're trying to put all this together, because there's no more right sizing to do. On the third one, it was the closure of Bremen School. And that's how we put this plan together to mitigate. And then we have another $3.8 million at the end. And we know a story about the $3 million that you guys approved for this year as a gap measure. And then we have another almost $800,000 that we have to mitigate. On the next slide, slide number 10. So slide number 10, 11, 12, and 13, they are kind of all combined together. Because slide number 10 is the summary version. This is my last report, my last financial report to October 31st. The next 3 slides after that is the detail that feeds that summary page. Now, I have heard, not just folks in this body, but in the community, we don't have a line item budget. So if you have said that we don't have a line item budget, I have to assume that you have not been paying attention to F&O. Because F&O has received this report and it's been published.
You might want to let us know what F&O stands.
Oh, fine. I'm sorry. Finance and Operations Committee.
Thank you.
Right? We meet every other Monday. It's the Monday opposite of the board meeting. So it's the second Monday and the first and the third Monday of the month. Board member Matt Wilcox is the chair of that board, of that committee. Every second meeting of the month, I provided the financial report for the previous month. This is an example of the last one that I provided on the second meeting in November. There's a line item budget here. There's just no other way to explain it, but there's a line item budget here. You can see it, it's been published. I have done it for August, I've done it for September, I've done it for October, and I will do it for November as well. For every single month, there's been a line item budget that's been presented and published publicly. So that there is no line item budget, I cannot personally understand that particular one. However, I will say though, that if what you're looking for is a budget book, as we've seen in previous years, that's a slightly different story, because the line item budget is what you have here. The book now goes into more detail about a specific budget line items for school and the STE count. That I do agree that has not been published for this fiscal year. And it will never be published this fiscal year. And I'll tell you the why. You have the line item budget for the district. The schools, the system does have a line item budget by school. From Munis, I can pull it up by school and I can show it to you. But to publish it in a book, it will take months for me to deconstruct the budget that was created by my predecessor and by another employee that's no longer with us, deconstruct all of the backup documentation that they provided. I search it, I look for it. You know that the draft budget book that you've seen that was online at some point had a lot of errors, had a lot of different discrepancies. I tried to deconstruct it, to put it back together so I can then revise that budget book. It was next to impossible to get it done, because a lot of changes were made after those sheets were supposedly completed. So I couldn't even tell where some of these numbers came from unless I would just start the process all from scratch from the beginning. When I presented this to my board members, who I received instruction from through the superintendent, the focus was on the budget for next year, because you have to start the budget for next year. And especially because I already came with a plan of changing the budget process and making a lot of different changes to not only the process, but also what the outcome was supposed to be. I needed time to do this. I needed time to focus on the budget for next year. And if I had focused on trying to put a budget book together, I would not be where I am today. And I will speak to that in a few minutes. The budget book, it's important. There's value in it. And you will get a budget book for this coming fiscal year. That there's no doubt about it. You will get it. I love it. I like it. It's important to have it. I don't disagree with it. But for me to try to put a budget book together for the year that we're currently in, it was just going to be extremely impossible, especially after the institutional knowledge that has done this budget for the last 3-4 years is no longer in my department. Seeing that there's a budget line item here, and anyone is welcome to always ask about what line item means, and I've talked about it during F&O meetings, what each line item means. I've talked about the other contractual service. I know that was a big line item that people were asking, what is that? What's inside that other contractual services. I spoke in length about it during the October meeting, I believe, and I provided a list of many examples of what makes up that budget line item. I spoke about the transportation line item, and I'll speak about that one a little bit more further down.
Just wanted to know that the actuals are here, because I
Yeah.
heard that question as well.
Yeah, the actuals are here. I mean, you see it in the summary version, you see it here. Now, I will say this. When you look at the summary page, I also heard somebody saying, Board, you have like an $8.5 million deficit already. And I was like, wait, what, 8.5? Like, where are we getting that from? Later on, as I was trying to figure out, where that came from, I kind of understood that they were looking at these, available balances here, and they saw some negatives there, and they saw 8.8, and there was some concern about it. So let me explain two things. One, this includes the encumbrances. Transportation line item and tuition line item already include encumbrances for the rest of the year. Oops, my apologies. For the rest of the year. So I'm already showing 12 months worth of transportation here, when in reality we have only recognized revenue for 3 or 4 months of the year. So of course it's going to show the deficit there. We haven't been able to recognize much of these revenue yet, especially the ones that come from special funds, because the special funds don't start on July 1st, as general funds do. The special funds start when they give us a special fund, sometimes October, sometimes December, sometimes January, depending on what special fund it is. Inter-district funding, they don't always start right at the beginning of the year. And we are not allowed to put anything in munis when it comes to revenue unless we have either already received it or we have an award letter that shows the amount. So it's important to understand that when you look at these numbers, you have to understand the other side of the equation. So that's one thing that's important to say, right? But here you have the actuals. And when you look at the second column, those are actual, those are expenses that have already gone out, versus at the end, that shows with encumbrances, together. So that's that. I'm gonna skip the next 3 pages unless you really, really wanna go into this line item, and you could do so in leisure time, and then, reach out back to me, and then I'll be more than happy to answer questions. Slide number 14, budget cost drivers. We talk a lot about other contractual services, so much money there, transportation, so much money there. I rarely hear about how much money there is in salaries. Well, here you can see clearly, just teachers alone. I'm not even talking about paraprofessionals, support services, administrators, let's remove them all. Teachers alone are 38.2% of our budget, 38.2. I assure you that after we finish negotiations this year, that's gonna be 40, 41%. That's just what it is. It just continues to grow. I also assure you that if I do this pie chart for every year before this year, you could see how that number continues to grow, And I would say, I'm not mad at it. I mean, teachers deserve the award. They deserve more money. They deserve to get paid like doctors get paid, like attorneys get paid. If you give me the revenue, I'll pay them that amount easily. And I will sleep happily, because I come from a family of teachers, and I know what that is. The problem is that I just don't have the revenue. So when you put now all together, all the salaries and benefits together without the other expenses, that it makes up 57% of our budget. So salaries and benefits for all the staff in the Board of Ed makes up 57% of our budget. Now, that's pretty normal in any organization. Salaries and benefits normally are more than 50% of the budget. That's normal. But what is not normal is for every other expense to also continue to go up and the revenue staying stagnant and not go up at the same pace as expenses are going up. And this chart just provides you a little visual. So when we have these conversations in the future, in the spirit of collaboration, that we know exactly where the money is. The money is not in contractual services. The money is not in transportation. Those two are big ones, but the money is really in salaries, in staffing. That's where the money is, because it makes up 57% of our budget. When we move to the next one, this one, the next 3 pages are special funds, because we were in this conversation of trust and transparency. I wanted to be a little bit more detailed about special funds. I won't go into my whole speech about the dynamics between special funds and general funds, but this special fund, this is also important. I will also note that the special funds that you see here through October, that $64 million budget that you see at the beginning, that's not all of it. It may go up to 80, 81, possibly, but like I said, we are not allowed to put in munis any special fund revenue until we get either awarded or we actually receive it. So as of October 31st, we have $64 million worth of special funds, and then you can see how much we spent, how much we encumbered, and how much we have available. But that number changes substantially as we start getting these awards and we start solidifying what that number will look like, and then we start then putting all these expenses. How, and I'll say this now while I'm talking about special funds. How do we mitigate the budget of the year? Let's say we're in the month of May and June, and I'm already projecting that we're gonna have, I don't know, an $11 million deficit like last year. At some point it was, when I got here to the Board of Ed, the first thing my predecessor told me is like, my projection is that we're gonna have a $9 point something billion deficit. I said, okay, welcome to New Haven, right? And I said, okay, what are we doing about it? Did she explain to me the process? And that's exactly how it played out. And that was a good learning experience because now I understand the dynamics between special funds and general funds. Why I pay attention to these grant special funds so much is because there's a team behind, made out of directors and other leaders that are managing these special funds individually, specifically, and they are assigned to different people. And towards the end of the year, we're able to see how much special funds can we leverage within the scope of what special funds are meant to be, because when you receive these special funds, you have to write a scope of service of what it is that you're going to spend it on. That we could leverage some of these to at least alleviate the weight and the burden on the general fund that we have. So all of a sudden, that $9.9 million deficit when I got here on June 9th, at the end of June, just less than a month, turned out to be 4.9, because we were able to achieve some savings by leveraging some of the special funds. That's why it's so important that we keep an eye on this and we understand how we can use special funds in a way that's within the parameters of what the special funds were given, but at the same time that it also alleviates the burden on the general fund. So this is one of our ways of mitigating, but we won't know how we could use this until much later in the year as we see how much special funds we have available and what are the areas of the general funds that are receiving that financial pressure that we could then be able to leverage. On the next slide number 17, it just basically shows the pie chart of the grants funding, the special funds, and the special funds, they cover just more than 50% of it is for full-time salaries. Now, I believe I heard one of the elders here when they were doing the presentation, something about sustainability and expiring. I can't remember. I don't have it in front of me. But so now that I immediately came to this chart because most of the full-time salaries that are paid by special funds, it's through entitlement grants, right? These are grants that we know are continuing, that don't have really an expiring date, like whether it's Title I, whether it's Alliance funding. So these are fundings that we know are not expiring anytime soon, or that we are continuously getting them year after year, and we have a lot of confidence that it will continue to be the case. There's a very minimal, I could probably count it with probably my two hands, of numbers of staff that may receive a portion of their salaries from a grant that we have to apply on a year-to-year basis, that we are not necessarily always getting it year by year, but it's extremely minimal, those cases, and they are not, none of them are staff that are facing children. These could be just support staff that are as important, but they are very, very, very minimal. So the problem of sustainability with grant funding to pay for salaries is not a problem. This is not an issue. However, we continue to look at it because if there's a fluctuation in any of the federal funding, as we see with our political environment, I wouldn't doubt that could happen. Then we have to be able to shift and be able to support our teachers or our staffing. But if that were to happen, then we'll be ready to deal with it at that point. When it comes to the financial piece, I just wanted to share these pieces, right? And hopefully it could create an opportunity for more conversations about the financial piece or create new questions that you may have. And I'll probably stop now and I open the floor because the next few slides are related to class size. And that will be our superintendent that will be driving that conversation.
Thank you for the presentation. Please continue.
Just a few more slides, because there has been a lot of talk about class size. And yes, we hope that we had an ability to have smaller classes throughout the entire district. But as we know, that is an issue of funding. But I also wanted to give you a reality of where is it that we stand today. So what you're seeing are the numbers today. So if you're looking to read this chart on this slide, you're saying how many classes across the entire district right now are a size of 10. So that's what you see, and you see the percentage over the overall. All the way down to the contractual class size in the current bargaining agreement, which is 27. So you see there the range all the way from 10. There may be a few under like 9 or 8, we didn't count those. But you see everything from 10 all the way to 27. So I just wanted you to have that in front of you. Also, so that you could see the average class size per school. So you have that as well. But again, I figured we're going to be here, we're going to be talking about it. It has been top of mind. Wanted to give you that data. The other piece is that I also hear a lot around cost central office, and you're going to close the budget. So I wanted to give you, here is the preview, open book, as it relates to central office administration, composition. Here is where we are, comparison from 2021 all the way to last year. So again, trying to be responsive to the questions that you have offered. So with that, we are now open for additional questions that you may have.
Thank you for that presentation. We'll now proceed to questions from members of the Joint Committee. It's a big committee, and so as I stated at the outset of our meeting, we're going to allow colleagues to ask up to 3 questions each. Doesn't mean that you have to ask 3 questions. You could ask fewer. Part of the reason is I want to make sure all of our colleagues have a fair opportunity to ask questions, but also I'm aware of the fact that there are several people who've signed up to testify, and we don't want them to start testifying at 10 o'clock tonight. We want them to start like at 8 or 8:30. So we need to get through our questions. I also just want to remind colleagues that when we close the public portion later on this evening and we take the vote to read and file this item, because it's a read and file item, there'll be discussion of that motion, and that's a time when folks can actually say what they think. So think about that and save it for that moment. This is the moment to ask questions. So if colleagues have questions, now is the chance to ask them. The queue is open. Questions from committee members? Questions from committee members? They're probably taking a moment to gather their thoughts, which is welcome. Questions from committee members? Who wants to go first? Alder Morrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And so my question is just in regards to the now. All of that you presented, it was detailed, it was very comprehensive, and I get it. And we're back at $22 million that you guys need for the next budget. Something like that, right? Somewhere it was high. So what plan have you come up with, or yet now, to address the money that you're going to need for the next budget? Because the reality is, budget season is starting March 1st. You guys are going to come and present, and just like last year, you came and presented, and you had this big gap of over $20 million that you needed. We did all these things, and so I want to know what's the plan, or where are you?
Sure. Well, I mean, we just started the budget process, and I have already done the budget for the general fund budget for every single school. A draft has already been put together. Every principal of all schools have already received it. We have already met as well. In fact, we just met so this week. I just finalized the last school, and I just began doing the same with each department. So now we're at that stage where now they are seeing what the numbers are, and I would say that based on the on how we're changing the allocation internally, every single school, actually, let me take that back. 94% of the schools have seen an increase in the general fund. So some by as little as $2,000 and some by as much as $26,000 more compared to last year, because we implemented an equity-based budget process that not only uses enrollment as the main factor to allocate the funding, but also now I include another line, a new line that's never been done before. It's called additional support, that's based on the enrollment of special education students and multi-language learner students. This is the same concept that we've been asking the state to do, which is to have a weight for spec students in the ECS formula that they rejected and they haven't done it yet. So I said, they are not doing it, but we're doing it because we have to set the example. And so every school receive additional funding based on the enrollment of spec students and ML students. And that's a draft, and they all know that I'm gonna try to make sure that every other department, every other area, we are able to balance it so we don't have to touch that money. But I started with them, and I already presented it to them because I wanna be transparent and I wanna be open about the fact that we wanna do this in equity based and that the money should be directed to schools and not anywhere else. That should be our first priority, and that's what I did. But the one thing that I will ask, when you're asking about, this $20 million, we haven't made the ask for next year yet, so I don't know what that will look like, but you probably around a good ballpark, that we may ask for another $230-something million again, because that's the reality. My first ask is that in March, February, whenever it is that the legislative session start, I'll ask all 11 of you to join me at the state and then just go and ask for more money. It's just as simple as that, right? If we get more money, we don't have to have this discussion about deficit. We don't have to have this discussion. So if I see you, all 11 of you behind me and behind the superintendent asking for more money at the state, that's step number one. That's what we gotta do. That's the biggest problem here. We just don't have the revenue. And I'm not pretending that the city is gonna be able to foot the bill. I know that's not possible. Most of you know, all of you know, I'm a councilman in Hartford. I know how it works. If Hartford asks me for the same thing, I'll be in your seat doing the same thing, be like, oh, I'll give you one or two, that's all I got, but I don't have, oh, but what about that rainy fund balance? Like, well, I cannot touch that in that manner, right? It's just, there's a lot of rules about it, right? I understand how that works. I don't pretend the city to foot the bill, but I do pretend the state to do it. So I ask all of you, join me. Join us in our advocacy for more revenue. So that is really the main answer to your question. What are we doing? Getting more revenue, but we need all your support to do so. I don't know how many of you did it this year, how many of you went to the state to advocate for funding. I'm not gonna pretend to know that whether you did or you didn't. I wasn't here, but I did for Hartford because at that point I was doing work for Hartford. And we were pretty successful at getting some of the things we needed. So I think that's step number one. But there's a lot more, right? Because when you look at the budget development plan that I put together, there's a lot of other components to it that will help us mitigate as much as possible. But I will tell you this, if it's $20-something million, the gap between what we have and what we need, I'm not gonna be able to mitigate that gap. Not through the process that we have in place. It's way too much. But it also speaks to the needs of our children. The needs of our children are a lot, and that requires a lot of money. And I am not going to sell you, that is not the case. If I tell you that I need $240 million, trust and believe that we need $240 million because our children deserve that and more than that. And that's just what it is. So I'm gonna be very honest and transparent about what it is that we need, but I'm also gonna tell you I cannot do it. And because I cannot do it with the revenue that I have, these are some of the difficult conversations we need to have after that. And we'll have those conversations with you. And you'll know about it. I just hope that we don't get that far.
So just to go back to my specific question, you haven't really come up with a plan, just in case, because we're all, the reality that you just spoke of, right? If you need 20 million from us, and we can't give you 20 million, what kind of plan have you come up with? So it sounds like you're starting your plan to really look at the kids and what they need and all of that, but you haven't come up with a right size.
I'm going to interrupt just for the sake of the audience. In finance, the question before us every year in the budget is how much more than last year we are going to give to the Board of Ed. We're required to give the same amount every year. So when Alder Morrison says $20 million, she's saying $20 million more than we gave this year, not a grand total of $20 million, because obviously it's $200-something million. So just point of information. Please continue.
Okay.
Like I said, step number one is to get more revenue. That's step number one, whether it's a state or any other source, that's step number one. Step number two, we're gonna look at all of our expenses and then find out, just like we did this year, just similar as you see slide number 5 or 6, similar plan. Look at every single area that we could cut. But like, as I said already, the cuts are getting very limited. Because we already cut to the bare bone. And as you noted, as I noted, I'm sorry, on the previous slide, most of the funding here, most of the expenses here are in salaries and benefits. So what's the plan? That's the plan, because that's what we're gonna end up looking at.
We're gonna ask you to switch microphones because that one is not working as well as it should. And
Oh, yes.
that one works much
Big
better.
difference. The other reason why the plan is halfway there is because we just started the budget process, right? By the time you ask me the same question in February and March, I will have more numbers and I will tell you, these are some of the categories that we know already that may have opportunities for us to mitigate. I will say this though, I was looking at transportation, because I know that there was a comment about transportation. And I'm sorry that I bring back, some of the information that I have from other transportation departments in other districts, but in New Haven, pretty much almost any student can get transportation. There are very limited parameters around who could get transportation. There's some, when you take into account the walking zone, right? If you're from K to 8, I believe if you're within half a mile from the school, then you don't get transportation, but then after that, it's a free-for-all. High schools, I think, is a mile and a half. Other districts have 3 or 4 tiers when it comes to the distance. The other factor is that there are no zones here in New Haven. So if you live in this side of town and you end up going to school in the other side of town, you get transportation. Doesn't matter that you have other schools that you could have gone to, but if you chose to go to the school on the other side of town, you get transportation. Automatically, you ask for it, you get it. There are no many stop gaps in between when it comes to transportation. And transportation is one of the areas that we have already noted, and we agree that is an area to look at, that expenses are continuing to go up. I also recently learned that the new contract with First Student, we have to pay 100% of the fuel cost. Minus the taxes, we don't have to pay the taxes, but 100% of the fuel cost. When I heard that, I almost had a little bit of a heart attack because I've never heard of such a thing. But again, I haven't worked in any other school district as much, so maybe it's just that I just don't know. But I immediately called Hartford because that's a school district that I know. I said, hey, do you guys have to pay for fuel? No, we don't. I said, okay, I just wanted to know how other districts do it. Thank you. We pay 100% of the fuel cost. So then I asked this question, me being, now I put a little bit my CFO councilman hat in at the same time, and I asked this question, I said, so if the school bus drops off kids and then during the day, that same school bus ends up doing a contractual service for, let's say, ACES or any other private entity or other organization, because hey, you have the driver, you have the school bus, they take it to a trip and then they will be back on time to service the school in the afternoon. How do we know that we're not paying for the fuel that they use for some other services that have nothing to do with the school district? Well, we don't. There's no way to know. I said, oh, interesting. Okay. So there are some areas, right? But this is a contract that was already in place, before my time, right? Something I can do about it, but there are some areas that I'm looking at. I'm going as detailed as possible to find opportunities for us, to find savings. So I disclose this one just so you can have an idea of how deep we're trying to go and how meticulous we are trying to find cost savings. So as I go through the process, I'm going to be able to see more of these and be able to find more opportunities. So there is a plan, and the plan is in progress.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Alder Morrison. Next on the queue is Alder Furlow, and after him, the queue is open.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I apologize, I do have to step out in just a few. Thank you for your presentation. Thank you, Dr. Negron, for your leadership. You've answered the majority of my questions through this presentation, but I would like to ask, would you walk me through, if no one else is interested, the budget process on your side? I think that some of the disconnect has been when there is an increase of funding requested and we don't have the backup to understand why there's that increase outside of things costing more, where those dollars are going to go. That's just a little bit of background. But I would like to know, how does your board, because you have a request, and then we get another number from the administration that usually is not what you requested. And so what number are we supposed to go with? There's two numbers, always two numbers since I've been on the board. And so there's that disconnect. Why is that? What's the, well, I can't ask you to speak for the administration, so let me rephrase and say, what does that process look like? Because all the members must vote on the budget. Is it unanimous?
So what I can share, and I'll let the CFO share as well, is that when we go through our budget process, we are going to think about where we see that the increases are going to come so that we can reflect an estimated cost of what it will take to run the district. That's what we are going to be asking for, right? We bring that to our board, we present the budget request. That request, right, then the mayor in any city is going to put a request based on his plan. But I cannot speak as to why the amount, why less, why more, and then you get to vote, right? Because we're part of whatever the mayor is going to ultimately end up requesting as part of the entire city budget. But we, on the board of E, we bring to our board members, this is the cost. This is why this is going to go up. And to say, this is what we're going to need. We always then at the same time talk about how would we mitigate, because always in the back of our heads, we know we need X more, we're not gonna get it. So immediately the board demands that we bring to them a plan as to how do we intend to mitigate it. So going back to Alder Morrison's question, which I think I understand, you saw the pain that we went through last year. We did mergers, last minute we had to go into a closure. Those are painful decisions that we have to make. What we have learned, because one of the questions was, what have you learned? I've learned a lot, right? Means push the budget process earlier. That's what we're doing. Starting much earlier. Try to build the equity, right? Honing in priority the schools. That's what CFO Hernandez just mentioned. So we can get a clear sense of what's needed at the schools, what's needed in the department. So then he can work out the idea of what are we anticipating for revenue, what do we know now, see as what we believe is going to be our cost, even this year, right, with the contract negotiations that are going now. So we could see where's the gap going to lie. We also know that once he does that math, collectively, my cabinet and I will have to start thinking about what are the options? Because my job is to bring options to my board. So I need to bring options to the Board of Ed to say, this is what we believe the gap is going to be. Here's going to be option A, B, and C. So there'll be scenarios that then they would have to find, okay, what can we live with as a board? And then that ultimately will be the one that then comes your way. But again, we are trying to push everything as early as possible, especially now because you heard CFO reiterate, which he learned from when he looked at everything. I've done all the combining of classes that I could possibly do. Right? I've done all that right sizing that I could do. I've done all the cuts that could possibly do. Where else? So I'm going to have to go with bigger, painful things in terms of how do we close future gaps. That's why we want to do our homework early, start the budget process early. That's why I want to make sure that I'm still being centered on what the community is saying. That's why all that feedback that came in that I went through with the board on Monday, so that I am centered. What are my kids saying? What are my family saying? What are all the staff inside of the district saying? So that that's top of mind to inform where are we going to be with the gap. Pretty soon, right, in a few weeks, there'll be another survey going out asking the public, okay, How do you think we should approach mitigation if we have to mitigate again this year? What are suggestions, what are recommendations? So that again, we can I want the voice of our entire community to inform the painful work that I anticipate we are going to have to do. Also, being open, transparent, getting people. We are going to be hosting 6 community conversations so that by then we'll know what does this budget plan look like from the school side, we believe it's probably starting to look like from the Board of Ed complete side, and inviting people. So for example, when we go over to Cross, we'll be inviting Cross, we'll be inviting the surrounding schools, come, engage in a conversation. If you're the wards representing those areas, you're gonna get a special invite. Let's come and look. This is where we are right now, what it's looking like for the draft of this school. Let's take the example. Explain to the public, this is the revenue that's coming in terms of ECS. So people understand this is our revenue. This is what we need. Talking big picture, I've learned these last 2 years, people don't grasp it. So we're going to try to do it now, looking at this school. Let's use this school as an example. Looking at what we believe we're going to need in the deficit. Where should we prioritize? Because that decision, that painful decision, needs to be a collective decision. So that is where we are headed, Alderman Morrison.
I just have one last question, and this will probably be relatively quick. Is there any time that, because I imagine your special funds programs are already running. You don't wait until you get the money to start them up. For the most part, you said that it could be later in the year, so I imagine that these programs are already running. So is there a time that the special funds do not come in, or you're not made whole by the special funds?
Let me use the example of Title I, right? So Title I, we break it down, the allocation that is going to go into the schools. And what we did was say, we have to wait, right, for everything to be approved, have an indication when those dollars are going to roll out. Often we'll put a window, right, because we also, usually those Title I funds are funding key services for our kids, particularly like after school and tutoring that are happening in schools, things that are very much needed. So we try to schedule it in a way where we're pretty confident when we feel like you are getting this money and you're getting it by X date, that then we say to our schools, okay, now you can begin. Now, so we don't say off the gate, started. No, we need to feel confident, like now we got word it's coming, right? Even though it hasn't kicked in, that we hear it, somebody on the line saying, you are getting X amount of dollars. It's coming your way. And then that's when we say, okay, let's give you now green light to begin the programming. Because again, we may know, but unless somebody says it, I don't want to make that risk even larger, right? Because often we have to then upfront money and then cover when those grants come in. So that's how we're trying to tighten up a little bit of the window while still meeting the needs of our kids. Because before, right, sometimes we're waiting so long, like really you're gonna run an intervention come March? All these months went by. What do you think you're gonna recover in March, April, May, and June? So again, just trying to hit that spot where it would be ideal in terms of minimizing risk, but still providing the services to your students.
That's very helpful. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Alder Furlow. And thank you, Alder Smith. I know that you have to go. Thank you for being here. So we've got a few colleagues on the queue, Alder Walker-Myers, Alder Punzo, Alder Shasta. The queue is open after that. I have one more acknowledgement to make, which is that former Alder Hurt is with us, and former vice chair of this committee, as a matter of fact. Next on the queue is Alder Walker-Myers.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your
And
presentation.
can we swing that microphone over to Madam President? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your presentation. So it was a lot of information about what you are going to do moving forward. And I'm trying to formalize my question because my mind is in like so many different places. Um, Ever since, as long as I can remember, we've always had challenges with the funding for the Board of Ed. Um, as far back as I can remember, my mother was a teacher in this system that was buying her own school supplies in a class too, years ago. When you budget, we know staffing and paying for employees is a large portion of the budget, but that is also a portion that could kind of be managed because we know when we have contract negotiations, we know how much percentage is going to go up over the course of a certain amount of years. So you can actually have those figures when you first start your budget process. I'm more interested in the things that we can't control because I think people should get raises every year because at the end of the day, when those expenses are going up all around us, if our paycheck is not going up, we can't manage. So we always have to start, I believe, from that place. But the things like the transportation, I heard you mention, I know special ed is a certain part of our budget that we receive money back from certain places at whenever the time is. I'm not sure about that. But those type of things like the transportation, I heard the CFO mention like we're paying for gas 100%. Of course, we're paying for other people's gas because I mean they're not draining the gas we paid for out and then putting it back in for somebody else. So when is the opportunity to look at those kinds of things and say, well, we're not going to go with this company anymore because this company is doing this? Like, what is difficult around making those decisions because we could kind of forecast those things too because we know when the contract is up. Are we starting early enough looking at those things so that we could recognize them and be able to approach them in a certain way? I guess is what I'm trying to say because I know it's not easy. I do not think it's easy at all. I think our kids deserve it all. I think it just frustrates me a little bit when we're sitting here because we know we're going to be faced with making a difficult decision coming up.
So one of the things we do are looking at is all of the current contracts, particularly the large ones, transportation, facilities management, all of those, looking at what are we getting out of them, what it costs, and also really looking at as we write on next set of contracts, putting in those due diligence so that we are getting the maximum need out of it. And again, looking as the contract vetting committee is done, look at the resources, see if it's something we need, the needs versus the wants, and what we can live without, and also trying to maximize what we do for the taxpayers.
And if I may, because you did talk about the salaries, right? But I also want to share a little bit about the complexity as it pertains to the Board of Education. So it is a moving target. So if you follow, right, we report every board meeting, you see how many people were hired, how many people left, and often, right, and what's happening more of late is that we may have a staff person that leaves. That person was probably earning $50,000 a year, and then we are hiring, and based right on the shortage today, it's really hard to find people. And when you find people, like you want to hire them. And if you can get people who are good, we hire them. We try to be, and I look at every single one. Whenever somebody leaves and comes, that's another process that we've instituted. HR will send me that. They need my approval. So I'm trying to keep an eye on how much more money am I spending. But when it comes to, all right, this person left for 50,000. We have somebody ready to come, but they're going to cost 100,000, doubled. And I'm saying, it's killing me, but I have to say yes. What am I going to do? Leave my kids without a math teacher? Leave my kids without a science teacher? So that's the complexity also on the staffing as it relates to our ability to be able to project that and control it. Because again, ultimately, we want highly qualified teachers in front of our kids.
Thank you for that. I agree with that. That's not, so I'm glad to know like that's a different factor because I wasn't thinking about when somebody leaves, if you pay more. But to me, that is still something that you can track, right? Because we know even that person for the next year of that contract, they're gonna have a certain percentage increase. So that's what I was saying, more like if we know we got 100 people and then we got 102 and they're making this amount and everybody getting a 3% raise, it's kind of easy to, not easy, but you can kind of project that out is what I was saying. Not that we don't, when someone leaves, we don't hire and pay them more.
Sure, and those projects we make, and if I have a 3-year contract for the teachers or paraprofessional, I know what the percentage is, and I can estimate that, and I can give you the numbers, 2-3 years ahead of time, and that's not the problem. The problem is to get the revenue to cover that. And that's always going to be the problem at the end of the day, right? I can tell you that I expect this particular expense to grow by X percentage because I already have the data, I already have the contractual agreement that tells me so. The problem is, how do I allocate revenue to cover that expense, right? If the expense is going to increase by $7 million for any one particular, bargaining unit in salaries, that's $7 million that I can find of new revenue. And that's the challenge.
Yes, thank you. I understand that. Maybe I phrased my question incorrectly because that's not where I was going with it or what I was thinking. I was just saying that it's certain things that we could project out for 15 years, whatever it is, because we can start with the base. We know that when these salaries go up, nobody's gonna come in there talking about I want a 1% raise. It's just what I was saying. So the things that we could control or that we could kind of forecast, we're doing. That's why I was more interested in like what we're doing with the contracts and all of that stuff, because those are, in my opinion, those are things that we could really like look at and maybe try to see how we can maximize the most out of that to help cover some of those raises and stuff that we know our employees are going to get. But I appreciate all the information. Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Alder Walker-Myers. Next on the queue is Alder Punzo, followed by Alder Festa, and then Alder Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had 3 questions, but 2 of them have been answered already, so that's good. My next one is special ed. I know, through the years since I've been involved in education for 49 years, which I loved, there's always a big cost there with outplacement and stuff like that. Are you looking at that? Because I from one of our committee meetings, I believe the figure was around 25 million. I could be off, outsourcing stuff like that. Are we looking at that? Maybe bringing some kids back in that could be brought back in. I know Wexler was one of the places that we thought of, but if you can talk a little bit about that, I appreciate it.
And again, we also have, I think she's still here, our executive director who does an amazing job is here tonight. That's also always a moving target as it relates to our budget. So we may make all the projections around staffing, around enrollment, and before you know, you may have 2 kids who enroll. And all of a sudden, right, they're coming in and they require extensive programming. Sometimes those students have to be outplaced. Those costs, not just for New Haven, that this is something that my colleagues and I talked about, that could throw your budget off at any given time, right? And those are things that you cannot predict. What we are doing is continuing to look at what are the possibilities of cost savings. And you mentioned, right, Wexler, we do now have the Academy of Exploration, which is the facility that we're using over at Wexler. And there we do have some students that we were able to bring back to be able to have them educated there through an innovative program that we have begun, right? So those are some ideas that we're looking at in terms of like long term, right? Could we really deepen that pilot, get really good at the work that is going on, bring the right staff, because you gotta have the right people, the right support. We're grateful for the partners right now that are supporting that work, so that eventually, right, we can get more kids to come in and expand. So ultimately, we end up saving money, right? Perhaps we don't have to send as many kids out, but it is a reality. And we do get some reimbursements back. That's the excess cost grant, but that's only a percentage of what you spend. right? The way that it works. But again, special ed, it could go anywhere. But yes, Tiffany continues to look at programming, costs, where can we save? The other piece too, as it relates to contracts, because those are parts, some of the contracts that we bring through is related to the fact that, we have to meet, special education services, and we do. Sometimes we don't have enough people, and we have to contract out to get psychological services or get speech services. So again, that is part of those other contractual services, that are there.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Alder Punzo. We have three colleagues on the queue, Alder Festa, Alder Marks, and Alder Miller. That's now four colleagues on the queue. And so we move next to Alder Festa. Let me bring this over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, the panel, for the presentation on the budget, as well as answering some of the questions that my colleagues have asked. But even more questions somewhat developed from those answers. And I'm looking at my notes and I don't even know where to start because I have so many things that are going in my head, with SPED now, with that. But I'm gonna just go with, Dr. Negron, you mentioned some of the decisions have been very painful. But who is making those decisions? What are some things that have been painful decisions to make? Do you have a panel? Do you have a group? Do you consult with teachers, the schools, based on these decisions? I'm not sure I understand how those decisions are made and who agrees to them.
So I have to say that part of my role as a superintendent is to ensure that I bring forth a budget to the Board of Education, right? That comes with the role. When we build the budget and I have to look at mitigation strategies, I am using the knowledge of everything that I hear over the year, where the needs are, priorities are, to then be able to put things together. For example, when I knew I needed to find cost savings, and I said, well, maybe here's an opportunity now to do a consolidation. I knew that we had the issues around facilities. How can we consolidate, bring people together, feasibility study to do cost savings? So a lot transpires from the conversations that go on from all meetings, committee meetings. Could be FNOs, it could be Board of Education, it could be committees and conversations when people are talking about ideas, right? There's always topics, different committees throughout the entire district that ultimately feed to inform what things should we consider. And ultimately, it is leadership that has to come together and then feed everything. What did we hear? To then put ideas together and put a plan together. So I bring plans for others to respond to that have been informed by a collective of thoughts and ideas. But if what you are asking, I'm just gonna cut to the chase, what I believe what you're asking. If you're asking me that every decision I'm going to make, that I am going to say, I'm going to put a committee for this, I'm going to put a committee for that, I'm going to put a committee for this. The speed at which I am working, I am not going to do that. We are tasked with being the management body so that we can go to our board and get the board ultimately has to decide. So I have to have internal procedures to be able to do that. And I think I'm proud, I'm gonna say that I am proud about the approach that I have brought in for now in year 3, where I feel I am always bringing voices into the table to inform the work that we are doing. So that is the best way that I can answer. But again, if what you're asking me is, you're going to end up in a $10 million gap, what's your plan going to be? I am going to leverage, like what I just told you, what is the community telling me through my surveys? This next survey that's going to go out, how do we mitigate? What ideas do you have? I'm going to bring all of that with the design team to the table to be able to put plans together and then present them to the community and then ultimately to my board.
And I wasn't insinuating you have to have a committee for every decision.
I know, but I know that others have, and I wanted to use the opportunity to just put it out there.
You know, and, you know, it just, having a meeting just to have a meeting is not necessary or important, but, you know, I think it's important to know how those painful decisions are being made, so the public knows and everyone, including the students, know these decisions are being made because we as a collective managerial team that you trust us to make these decisions is you know, basically what you're saying.
And that is why I think those community conversations that I spoke to you about are gonna be so important.
Yeah.
Because it'll give me an opportunity to say, this is where we are, this is what we're facing. What should we consider in the plan? What should we consider?
Which brings it to the right sizing. You know, that was, I think, on page 9 of your presentation. I mean, what is it based on? What data? What are we, you know, basing all this right sizing on? There, you know, it could be on so many.
So I can answer that question because we've done right sizing for 2 years now. My year 1 and my year 2. What I did was hone in, my first year, hone in on elementary schools and say, okay, let's look at every school. Let's look at every grade level. Let's look at every classroom. How many kids do we have? And that is right sizing. That's the only thing we did in year 1. We said, if the school has 3 classrooms in this grade, based on contract language, instead of 3, can I now have 2? So I can save 1. So that accumulated to all the consolidation that we did in year 1. In year 2, we did the same process for the high school.
So with that in mind, with the right sizing, because I do remember asking this question during budget season, as far as what has been done with positions of non-facing students, and the answer was there are no positions that we can cut that are non-student facing.
No, but there were, right? So when we did the 77.
Since the budget.
77 as part of the mitigation, right? When we did the 77 as part of the mitigation, there was a collective of vacancies. There was a collection of consolidating, and then there were some opportunities that I was able to find with that 9 FTEs inside of non-facing folks that you see here on slide 9. So looking for opportunities everywhere. And then as part of that also, right, when I saving costs by moving the students out of Wexler, right, to fill classrooms. And that also gave me the $1.7 million.
But even with, you know, moving students around, et cetera, we still have smaller classes. So there are some schools that have the 27 students in a class and then something similar only has 8. Is that due to poor scheduling and management? So why are some schools, let's talk just one school. School A, classrooms might have 27 students and some classes might have 8. Why is that? I mean, if we're really focusing on.
So you would have to look at the type of class, right? So take like a class of 10. I bet these classes of 10 probably not going to be a kindergartner class, right? But you might have like a class that runs that it's like an intervention class that is running. That may be 10 kids in a class during that block because it is an intervention. At the high school level, right, you might have a specialized class that you are running, and maybe that one might have like 15 kids, as opposed to like an algebra 1 class, then you probably end up with like 18 kids, 20 kids, possibly you want to be one of these 27s. So it depends on, like, usually your core classes, based on enrollment, you're gonna see probably on the higher end, right? Like your math class in an elementary school when it's time to do math class. At a high school when it's time to do a biology class. But when kids may go into something specialized, those could possibly be smaller. So I wouldn't say that it's poor scheduling, because as part of the work that we did through right sizing, we also looked at scheduling. Are people optimizing the way that they schedule, right? To be able to take every opportunity possible. So I can tell you, I'm confident now that having looked at that deeply and gone through that process, I do not believe that it has to do with poor scheduling.
So the microphone was taken away from me, so I'm cut off by.
That was your three questions. Excellent questions.
I do have more, but I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder Festa. So we have three colleagues on the queue, Alder Marks, Alder Miller, Alder Verdente. I encourage colleagues to get on the queue now, because before too long, I'll cut it so that we can get to the public portion before 8:30, if possible. Alder Marks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Chair Fonza. Thank you for your presentation. I think piggybacking a little bit on Alder Festa's question. So hopefully I can help you further some of your thoughts you're thinking about. Really appreciate the presentation. I obviously appreciate your sincerity, your thoroughness, your hard work. I sit on the education committee. I see your workshops and presentations, and obviously thank you for the heart that you all put into this. What I'm interested in those was, I think, a narrative that I heard from Mr. CFO. And I think I heard him say things like expenses are expenses. It's not an expense problem, it's a revenue problem. I appreciate maybe from an accounting perspective that might be the case, but I think from a public taxpayer perspective, that's, I think, not the way the taxpayer, at least the taxpayer in my ward, is seeing it. The question they have is kind of what are these expenses? And I think it goes to Alder Festa's question of sort of what are the metrics, who are the decision makers, where is the decision making regarding what money is being spent on. And I appreciate that certain things need to be dived into. Obviously there's issues with transportation. We've heard very compelling workshops about custodial services, how we should be doing that. There's some big bucket items, but then there's other items which I think really get to the crux of things, and it's literally the numbers of teachers. And I just wanted to put my pin in this issue that I don't think expenses are expenses. I actually think that expenses are the crux of things. Sort of what is the original ask and what do we really need to educate our students. Obviously, unlimited money would be brilliant, but to get to my question, I'm just looking at something. It's just one thing that jumped out. Maybe there's an easy answer. I doubt I found, the diamond in the haystack, but I'm just curious about something that I saw, which is on page 21. For instance, I'm looking at page 21, which was staffing composition, which is not about salary. I concur completely with President Walker Myers about the need for, salaries to be appropriate. I'm just looking, for instance, I think Superintendent Negro in 23-24 was your first year, is that correct?
Yes.
And I'm just looking in from the bottom, 1, 2, 3, 4, the fourth substantive fourth substantive row from the bottom, fifth total.
Yes.
Other staff, non-instructional services, and there was, more than doubling of the numbers from 498 to 1,091. So just sort of curious, what was that, and who made that? Like, what went to that decision? Because that would be an enormous expenditure and into the salary piece of the pie.
So one correction, right? So yes, I started in 23-24. Budget for 23-24 was already developed, right? Done. The 24-25, here where you have other staff providing non-instructional services, those things could be, I'm trying to think now that you're pointing it out.
It's the double.
That could have a whole bundle of like everything else that supports a school.
Care coordinators, in-school suspension, behavior techs, those are among the support items. Youth coordinators, those would fall into
A lot of those like non-certified type of positions that are allotted to schools to support.
But if I may, I'm just sort of asking, the question is, somebody made a decision to, I mean, double that number of staff in that category versus, addressing classroom size versus allocating that money to salaries. Somebody made a massive decision to, double. So just where do those decisions come from? Where do those decisions come from, and who's involved? Because I think that might be the kinds of questions that people are looking for when they're asking for line item budget.
And I will dig in, because I don't want to give you answers. I want to be able to have my chart to say this many, this many, this many. My guess will probably be that, remember that everybody was still dealing with COVID, and New Haven was the district that stayed closed, the last one to open. And a lot of the funding that was used, utilizing, right, the extra dollars, a lot of it went into bodies to support student re-engagement, mental health. So I would venture to say that that's where a lot of that exploded in trying to do that work, but I will definitely give you an answer.
I think my bigger question though isn't
Well,
what that was.
Hold on.
I'm sorry.
Let me just jump in for a second. Would you like me to follow up on that item?
Actually, yes, but no, that wasn't really my question. If I can clarify my question. Through the chair, I think that committee members would like the answer. But I think my real question is just to ask, and it's more of might be a rhetorical question. Who makes these decisions, and where's the transparency on these kinds of decisions to double a certain category of staffing? I think that's my question.
I think that actually we should get the answer to the specific example that you're posing, because I don't think we should be asking rhetorical questions. But I think the example that you're giving could be very instructive. And so we should get that answer after you've had a chance to dig into it, and then come back to us or send it to us, and then we can see what we learned from looking at it.
Thank you for the clarity, Mr. Chair. You've been doing this for a long time.
Any further questions on the members?
No, thank you.
Okay. All right, so two more colleagues on the queue, unless someone who hasn't asked questions yet joins the queue. Next is Alder Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you very much for the presentation and all of the work that I know you've been involved in very recently. I have been to Hartford to advocate for the schools many, many times. I have spoken with every member of our delegation, many other elected officials across the state. And you mentioned that you thought the starting point is revenue. What I have heard in asking for more revenue for our schools, which I believe we need, is concern about the absence of, I think, what you're calling a budget book, a line item budget with the level of detail that you would expect from any public entity that we have for the city of New Haven, that we have for the state of Connecticut, that we have for the Hampden Public Schools, for example. Their budget process that go through every single chart of account, line by line. And it is concerning to me that you seem not to be able to make sense of the current budget for this year, which is our money. That's what's being used in our schools this year, not because you don't have the skills to do so, but because there's some lack of information or something. So my question is, why is it that it is so difficult to identify what the line items are? Why would you not be able to relatively easily create a budget book if those line items in fact exist? And what have been the structural barriers, the questions that we asked in the presentation, why is it that for, I think, a decade plus, as long as I've been paying attention to this issue, we have not had this kind of a budget, which is such a basic necessity for a public entity to have transparency of the community. And I don't think, by the way, I don't think it's a question for you. You've just gotten here, so I think it's a question.
No, but I will tell you one thing that I experienced, and I don't know if I mentioned this to you before, but because it weighed in my heart, like the fact that a budget book was needed and people were asking for it, and I was trying to figure out how can I put a budget book together with the information that I have and the reality that I already know exists. When the budget for this year was created, as I was told, it was created, started in somewhere in November, December, and then January, that's when the draft, what was put together. That's when the budget book then gets created, right? At that point, February, March, the book gets created. By the time I get here and I start looking at this budget and I start seeing the discrepancies that you also, during that draft budget book that you all received, I said, okay, I could fix this, right? This is my intent, right? I'm new, I'm excited, let me fix this. I started looking into the behind the scenes numbers, and I couldn't make sense of how some of the numbers were put in those pages, right? Because I said, how is this number in this page? And then when I look at the total, which is technically basic math, it doesn't at all. So then I said, let me go to the source documents to see if I can find out whether this number changed, maybe perhaps, and then the total didn't change, or something simple that I can explain. My challenge was that now I'm living in the reality of it today. So now it's July, it's August. I already know exactly what the reality is versus what the reality was back in February and March when the budget was created. So I was being challenged with, if I want to create a budget book, I have to now go back in time and create a budget book based on what was the reality and the projections that were during those times that the budget was put together, and not based on the reality that I know exists today. After the right sizing, after all these movements. And I didn't feel that it makes sense to put something out there that didn't meet the reality. And that's how budgets are everywhere at all times. Even this year, when I put a budget out there in February or March, and you look at that budget in August, when we already know how much revenue we got, when we already know all the movements of staffing and all the changes that possibly could happen, there's never going to be an alignment. That's what budgets are. It's a point in time. So now I'm asking myself in the month of August, do I go back in time, a time that I wasn't here, but I may have enough source documents to make it happen, and create a budget book that I know doesn't really even meet or even align with the reality that I know to be true today? Because back in February, there was no right sizing done. All the teachers were in different places, all the staff were in different places. So I'm going to create a book that schools are going to look at and be like, I don't have 25 staff, I have 22. What is he talking about, right? It was difficult for me to put something out there that wasn't even as close to the reality, because I had to satisfy the need of having a budget book with numbers that were put together in January and February. So that was a big challenge for me, but also what I explained earlier, which is the timing of it as well. I needed to really focus on putting a budget book together for the next fiscal year. So it was a combination of both pressures at the same time.
One thing, thank you. One just follow up, if I may. So we really need to be able to tell a story about not what we're doing going forward, but why it is that we haven't had this in the past. Like what was the block? What was the barrier that all of a sudden we're now going to be able to overcome in order to have this just like basic foundational document, so that when we are advocating, which we will, we can explain what is different this time and why we've had these struggles in the past.
My team is reminding me that there has been a book produced. There has been a book, but that the book has never had the detail that we're now building. So the book has been produced, just now with the detail.
Correct.
Right? So I think that's the structure that I'm of course trying to build now. And again, I cannot speak to that because I wasn't in the weeds. In terms of the CFO trying to put it together. But again, correction that the book has been produced, it's just not the level of detail that we want, you want it, right? Because it gives more transparency to what you're looking for.
And was that a decision, like a policy decision made not to provide that level of detail? Was that just habit that the district got into?
I think it was just the way it has always been like that on the Board of Ed side. That I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I don't want to speak for my former CFO, but basically when she came into the role, she continued to do what was done by her predecessor. So that has been the standard practice on the Board of Ed side.
Okay. Just one additional question, which is about contracts. And when we see contracts come to F&O, which I've observed when I can, they don't seem to be approved in the context of a budget line item. They're just approved. And you now have this contract vetting, so maybe that's been incorporated into your new process. But historically, I've not seen that happen. So I'm just wondering how decisions are really made about contracts in relation to the budget.
No, I'll start with the fact that at the FNO, when you look at the memo and the abstract, it does provides exactly the line, the budget line where it comes from. So it is there. And oftentimes, they talk about it and oftentimes they see what it is and they already know what it is and they don't have to go in depth into the line item, but they all have a line item. It wouldn't even get to FNO if it didn't have that line item listed there.
Let me just clarify. Yes, the line item is listed, but it doesn't say, this is, we have $100 to spend, we spent 60, this is 10, so we can spend it. It just identifies the account.
And that will be the role of the contract vetting committee, to make sure that before it leaves our committee and it goes to FNO, that we know that the funding has been identified and that the funding is there for it. And the value of having a finance person in the vetting committee is that I can easily get that information in real time to make sure that, okay, it's X amount of money, do we still have that amount of money available in the budget? And now we have that in place that will definitely satisfy that concern.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll leave it to the public and other colleagues.
Thank you, Alder Miller. I'll just observe that when the administration comes to the finance committee with requests for contract approval, we usually don't get, unless we ask for it, detailed information about which particular budgetary pot will be used to pay for it, unless they require a transfer because the pot that they wish to use doesn't have sufficient funds. So there were plenty of times when the request comes for approval for a multi-year contract and we don't get into those weeds. Well, perhaps we should, but when we review the budget every spring, we look at all the departmental budgets, we see what other contractual services are in each, but you could, with the city, go to the monthly financial report to see what those balances are, right? So if we ask for it, we can get it, it's at our fingertips. But when the staff come to us, unless they're asking for a transfer, the default assumption is that they have the money to pay for it.
And it's not different in half the same exact thing, but now with the vetting committee, we'll be able to satisfy that concern, for sure.
Thank you, Alder Miller. Alder Redente.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Dr. Negron, transportation currently sits at about 14% of the budget, about $36 million. During the inauguration, you and I spoke about ideas about getting back to neighborhood schools and regionalizing bus service. Can you speak about where your head is around that 2 years later?
I am so glad you brought that up. And I'm going to be honest and transparent because that's the only way I know. That is one of the opportunities that we have to explore. But I have to tell you that that has to come from the community. That is a community decision to make. I've done some homework and I learned that years ago, actually Mayor DeStefano put a committee together that explored transportation. And it was something that was led from the city side. And it had community input, board of ed input. But again, that is something that has to be done and looked at, and I encourage that we do that work and have a serious conversation about what we should do. Should we be drawing zones so that we can truly control the expense around transportation? But I'm going to be open. I'm going to continue to talk about that that's the driver, that is a conversation, a decision to make, but that is a community decision to make. I am too smart. I'm not dying on that hill.
Question number 2. I only had the one, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Well, thank you for asking that. Last call for colleagues on questions for these representatives of the Board of Education.
Just one more.
Okay. Well, before you do it, I'm going to just ask if Alder Flores has a question because you haven't asked. Okay, thank you. Last question, Alder Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just quickly on Munis. So the question we've asked about Munis, what is the plan to better utilize Munis as a tool?
Yeah, well, let me start for those of you that don't know. We are not the administrators of Munis, so we only have limited, access and functionality with it, and that's where your question comes from, because either I've said it publicly or I've mentioned it to you in other conversations, that there are some functionalities of Munis that I would love to have, like position control and being able to budget for next year without having to change the budget for this year, which I found that very strange that I cannot do that. Before Christine Bourne left, one of my finance directors, she started the conversation with Shannon McHugh's department. I can't remember exactly the person. And they started the conversation about providing that module to us and give access to one person to test it and work on it. Then that transition happened where the staff left, and I have to pick it up on the other end and continue that conversation with Shannon to make sure that we have that access and test it. Beyond that, I will add another ask here, because being able to budget for the future in Munis and have that position control, the position control will take quite a bit of time to implement because of the vast, the number of staff that we have and the amount of information, and then be able to integrate it with our current HR system. So that's quite a task, but it's important and essential. The other one will be for our principals to have access to Munis and be able to see in real time their budget to actual. I was surprised to learn that they don't have access to it, and I'm being challenged with the notion that they should have access to it. So there are other portions of the city that I have to continue conversation with to convince them and to let them know the importance of having that, right? Like other districts principals, they have access to, so they can see budget to actuals in real time. And I can't see how we could function more effectively if we don't have that functionality. So I have to continue having conversation with other components of the city to allow for that to happen. And I don't have access to Munis if I'm not inside my office. If I'm outside of the building, at another office, at another place, at my home or wherever, I don't have access to Munis. I cannot access Munis from my laptop. So it's very restricted to do it from inside the building. And that is a restriction for, so like if I'm in a conference or I'm in any other place, in a meeting, and I want to be able to access Munis, I won't be able to do so. So there are some components of the Munis functionality that I would love to have. It will increase our efficiency. So I do appreciate that question, because that's top of mind for me. But I have to continue conversation with the city, because we are not the administrators, so we don't have power over making those decisions. So I have to continue negotiating that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Alderman Miller. And I'll just note for the record that we had a conversation about Munis in one of our recent finance committees. And so definitely that's on lots of our radars about some of the limitations of that software platform. We want our city staff to have full functionality and good, powerful tools to do the work that we ask them to do. Okay, so we're gonna transition now to the public portion of this meeting. So let me just, first of all, thank you for being here. We would love for you to be able to stick around and hear what the members of the public are saying. Before we start calling up people to testify, we're gonna take a 5-minute comfort break. Because folks may need to stand up and stretch their legs and get a glass of water. But I expect us by 8:15 to be back here, ready to hear from the public. So we'll take a brief recess.
What's that? Cold to my bones. Have you always done or? No, always. Okay. What's that? Yeah. Always. Hot water, like honey, lemon, just hot. I could do lemon in it, but.
I'm gonna get some more tea. That's what I need.
Finals, and I was like, yeah, that's very true. Yeah.
Sneak behind you if I can.
Right after, okay. Yeah. Because I've been that person.
That's fine.
You've done this before. You're good.
In finance, because I really go so incredible.
That's different.
In city plans, although you're still meeting remotely in city plans. Yeah,
It's
like,
just like.
I generally don't, because I'm looking at the plan section. We used to, in city plan, when we meet in person, they used to, like, sandwiches to eat in front of the other stuff.
Yeah.
Like, if I wanted to eat, I would step outside and grab them. These people waiting forever, they're sitting there, I'm like, eating a sandwich in front of them.
The first board that we used to get the public comment used to have.
So people are pretty wiped up.
Well, they were just like,
Yeah.
and the board was stepping out from general, and they would be celebrating and raising their.
And now they do that. Well, we typically, of course, do this first before this.
I know,
Like,
it's different, or they're responding to.
They need to hear what they're
It's
saying.
not the whole meeting.
Well, when we do our finance public hearings for the budget, that's all it is. Well, we would do the public hearing first and then do the budget. So people can get a chance to come in. Yeah. I came in with a lot.
I think it's.
Well, when I heard it, was that. The budget with us and the session is February through May, the state session. I don't make any promises, but if they come through and for the next session, that have some bearing. Depends on what that budget says and if it all.
There are several pages of.
I'll pay that. Can I go to the house? And then publishing.
Elias had to leave, so you can skip him.
Already looking at it.
Oh, no, on
on the assignment.
testing.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Do you want to move over?
Sure.
You ready, Mr. Vice Chair?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Go get your Thank you, everybody. We're back in session. We'll start hearing from the public now. We're grateful that folks attended and waited patiently and listened to that discussion. And so now it's the public's opportunity to come forward and share their thoughts. Before we get to the list, let me just acknowledge that we received via email in advance of the hearing tonight testimony from 4 individuals: Dave Weinreb from 51 Perkins Street, Gina Biondi, who didn't get her address, but she works for the New Haven Public Schools, Jillian Greco, also works for the New Haven Public Schools, and Sally Esposito from 50 Downing Street. Their comments were supportive of the call for greater transparency and an ongoing dialogue around how to achieve that. So that's how I would characterize it, just in the interest of time. Now, I just want to remind members of the public that when you come forward, I'm going to ask you for your name and address to the record. If you want to give a business address, that's fine, but we'd love to know if you live in New Haven. So if you do, we prefer to hear your home address. Come forward, and you will have 3 minutes. Alder Punzo, co-chair, and I will be giving you little signals when your time is about to run out. So we're going to start with Gannett Fry Mason. After Mr. Fry Mason, we'll have Sam Lesla. Good evening.
Just as a clarifying question, I did submit written testimony to. Do I need to do it? And my name wasn't read. So I was just curious if it.
Probably, I haven't received it yet, okay. But if you submitted it to us, we'll make sure your full remarks are included in the public record.
Perfect.
So here's your 3 minutes.
Perfect. So, hello board, my name is Garrett Fry Mason, and I live at 40 Walnut Street in New Haven's Mill River neighborhood. I teach 7th and 8th grade math at Elm City Montessori School, a shortage area that is not able to retain and recruit teachers in New Haven due to lack of proper investment. I was also arrested last spring outside of Governor Ned Lamont's office to demand the state fix its racist and classist educational funding formulas that create profoundly segregated geographies of systemic violence and deprivation. As a Yale economics student, I also organized with the Endowment Justice Coalition and published an opinion piece in the Yale Daily News that demanded Yale divest from the imperialistic and extractive industries through which it has amassed its wealth and invest in its grotesquely large endowment into the city of New Haven. On Monday, I attended a Board of Education meeting where Mayor Elliker ended the public comment section with a lament about how teachers are not recognizing the efforts of the city. Today, I want to contest Mayor Elliker's corporate paternalism and reject the notion that teachers aren't giving credit to the city. In fact, the city not only doesn't give us credit, it denies the power of our labor at every turn and shrouds our institutional power behind bureaucracy, lack of common sense transparency, and corporate economic speak. In my opinion, the primary purpose of a union isn't just in serving its members, but in building a movement of working class solidarity to recognize and mobilize labor power and take it back from ruling class interests. We all know that teachers keep the city running with their paid and unpaid labor. The city literally cannot function if teachers don't show up to work. This is the power of our labor. During the negotiating process, we also uncovered more aspects of our institutional power that the city had yet to recognize or meaningfully disclose.
You have 1 minute left.
In negotiations, we have learned that teachers have been subsidizing the city's healthcare through millions of dollars in pharmaceutical rebates. This is the power of our labor. We have heard that teachers are essential to the insurance liability pool. This is the power of our labor. Yet, these revelations were only properly disclosed by the city when needed as a negotiating tactic to disempower our demands. We, however, know that the power of our union and labor are strong, and we are here to mobilize it. Stop obscuring the power of our labor with your mismanagement and lack of transparency. A government is not democratic if it monopolizes its decision-making power in the hands of a few behind a concerning lack of transparency and poor preparation. Our union will continue to wield the power of our labor in Hartford to fight for a reversal of the policies of disinvestment in New Haven. But I ask you, when will you stop wielding your power to deny us a fair contract and continue to make decisions for us and at our expense? I thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for your comments. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, thank you very much. Sam Lesulsa, probably not pronouncing that correctly, so no doubt, no doubt correctly. After this individual will be Dolores Bates.
Hi, my name is Sam Leska.
It's a K.
It's a K, yes. I live at 2088 Chapel Street in Westville. I too am a teacher at Elm City Montessori School. I'm a Westville resident and a parent of a New Haven public school student. I've taught in 3 different New Haven public schools since 2012. And I really care deeply about the city and the children that we serve. And I'm here tonight because New Haveners deserve clarity about how our public dollars are being used, especially in the moment when our schools are struggling to staff classrooms. As of this morning, New Haven currently has 50 certified teaching positions unfilled, and it's December. That means students are sitting in classrooms without teachers, with unqualified teachers. This is not happening because teachers are not looking for work. It is happening because the working conditions and compensation in New Haven are not competitive. This is a New Haven crisis. At this time, the public cannot understand how the district is using its resources because we do not have a clear, up-to-date line item budget. The budget provided to the union was nearly impossible to follow because the items were not clearly coded or connected to actual expenditures. Without transparent budgeting, the public and the teachers union are prevented from naming concerns, raising questions, or expressing priorities for our tax dollars. Whether the lack of clarity is intentional or not, the result is the same. Central office avoids accountability, and students and teachers pay the price. I want to be clear about something I witnessed firsthand. Last spring, I sat in this chamber while the police contract was being discussed. The conversation then was almost identical to the one that we are having now. Police leaders argued that recruitment and retention were urgent and that the city needed to act quickly and that investing in workers was essential to public safety. Those concerns were honored. The final contract included immediate raises, schedule changes, and a significant pay increases over 6 years. The difference is this: a predominantly male workforce was told their labor was essential and worth investing in. A predominantly female workforce is now being told to sacrifice again. This is part of a long pattern in which women's work is expected to stretch to fill every gap and to absorb every shortage. When the city chooses not to invest in educators, it's making a budget choice shaped by that inequity. And quite frankly, that's BS. The children of New Haven deserve stability, expertise, and adults who can afford to remain in this district long enough to build relationships and create lasting change. That cannot happen without a competitive contract and without transparency in how our public dollars are spent. I'm asking you to stand with educators and families, stand for fairness, stand for transparency, support a contract that respects and retains educators, support a budget that is clear, current, and public, support a process where NHFT has a permanent seat at the table so that the people who work in our schools are part of the decisions that shape them. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. Yes, if you have written testimony, we would be grateful if you would hand it to our staff, Ms. Maza. Thank you so much. So next is Dolores Bates, followed by Heiklis Williams. So next is Heiklis Williams, followed by Jessica Light.
Hello and good evening.
Good evening. Good evening.
My name is Heiklis Williams. I reside at 84 Stanley Street in New Haven. I'm also a paraeducator. I'm not a paraeducator. I also am the president of the Paraeducators Union in New Haven. And today I wanted to address, to advocate for a line item budget. Over the years, the budget has always been a mess. I've been a parent in New Haven Public Schools for over 20-something years. And years and years and years, I never understood the budget until in recent years, now where the budget becomes a little bit more clarifying. A line item budget is absolutely essential to build trust, accountability, and responsible stewardship to the public funds. It also allows for transparency, clear spending, and open financial reporting. Accountability is impossible without clarity. Detailed allocations help identify insufficiencies. Specific cost tracking prevents waste Clear responsibility lines ensure oversight. A line item budget gives board members the information they need to make informed decisions. It allows us to compare programs, evaluate costs, and understand trade-offs. Without this level of detailed decisions, that we don't have a data-driven planning improvement plan, and the program level insights supports are not smart investment. Cost benefit clarity leads to better outcomes for our students. Our mission to serve students with a line item budget ensures that resources actually reach classroom, teachers and staff, and learning environment, not just administratively, but it helps to safeguard the programs that matters most. Classroom focused spending stays protected, student-centered priorities remain visible, program integrity is easier to define. When the community sees a clear itemized budget, it becomes easier to support future funding initiatives. People are far more willing to invest in a system that demonstrates responsibilities and openness. Public confidence grows with transparency. Community supports increase when spending is clear. Long-term stability depends on trust. A line item budget is not a burden, it is a tool. It is a safeguard, it is a statement that we make that we take our responsibilities seriously. Our students deserve a school system that is transparent, accountable, and fiscally responsible. Our community deserves to know how its money is being used, and our Board of Education deserves the clarity needed to make the best decision possible. This is a part of the New Haven Public Schools strategic plan. Adopting a line item budget is not just a good practice, it's essential for governance and let's choose accountability. Let's choose that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions from colleagues? Seeing none, have a good evening. Next is Jessica Light, followed by Ashley Stockton. Good evening. Name and address for the record, please.
Good evening. I'm Jessica Light, 1370 LT Grosso. I'm a New Haven teacher, resident, and parent. Teachers in New Haven are being asked to behave ethically inside a system that does not behave ethically towards us. The district refuses to meet the most basic obligation of public transparency to tell the truth about where the money goes. We are hearing there is no money. The line item budget we ask for, the actual budget, not summaries, not sanitized categories, the actual budget is withheld. An institution that refuses to show its math forfeits its right to be believed. As a STEAM teacher, I teach kindergarten through 6th grade. The district professional development this year for me has been focused on learning how to use equipment my school doesn't even own and doesn't have the budget to purchase. That's because inequity grows fastest when decisions are made in the dark. I'll be transparent about my budget. I have been working here over 15 years and have a master's degree. My take-home salary ends up being about $56,000. My family pays over $10,000 a year in New Haven taxes, 18% of my take-home pay, gone before I fed my kids. I pay $1,000 a month in a Yale medical payment plan because teachers here are so poorly insured, medically necessary care becomes lasting debt. That's $12,000 a year gone. If my car breaks down, an Uber to and from work takes over half a day's pay. 4 hours of work buys me an oil change. I spend an average of $2,000 a year on my classroom because the district does not provide what my students need. That's 3 weeks of my salary gone because someone in a room I am not allowed to enter made choices I am not allowed to see. If I knew every dollar was being used wisely, transparently, and equitably, I would live with this hardship. Teachers always have. But I cannot live with the secrecy. Secrecy means inequity goes unchecked. Teachers are being asked to sacrifice for a system that will not even be honest with us about the necessity of our sacrifice. That is a betrayal, not just in low pay, not only in lousy overpriced insurance, but a betrayal in being asked to trust leaders that refuse to be honest. I am asking for something morally fundamental, to show the budget. If the Board of Education believes its decisions are justified, transparency should not be viewed as a threat.
Thank you. There's a question from a colleague.
Not a question, just a comment. I just want to thank you for using your voice tonight and so many times before tonight. Thank you.
Next on the list is Ashley Stockton, followed by Jennifer Graves. Good evening. Name and address for the record.
Good evening. My name is Ashley Stockton. I live at 209 Willow Street in New Haven. Thank you for asking for this workshop. I think it's super important. I actually had prepared testimony, but after listening to what we all just listened to, I have some totally different things I just want to underscore tonight. First, I just want to say, this is my 25th year as a public school teacher, New York City and New Haven. And I also spent a couple of years working as the executive director of a nonprofit in New Haven and a school, running a school and a nonprofit. And our budget, the budget I was responsible for, is a legal document. I don't really know yet what to do because I haven't processed with information we heard tonight, but I'm utterly confused how sharing the budget from last year is a problem in any way. It's a legal document. And so I think the points I want to get to are this. At the Board of Ed meeting on Monday, Justin Elliker said to the room, no one has done more for teachers in New Haven than me. No mayor has done more for teachers in New Haven than me. My working life as a teacher in New Haven for the past 5 years, out of 25 years, is the worst it has ever been in every metric, in every single metric. And so I'm just at a point where I don't want to be told who's doing what for me. I don't want to be read numbers from a budget and told where cuts might be made and how to plan for my life and how to plan for my children based on where things may or may not happen, but we'll let you know, and then have a budget never be released. The trust is gone. And though we all want to participate in no fault problem solving and assuming best intentions, it's impossible to do that.
1 minute.
When we're being told by the mayor that he's the best we've ever had, when we're being told by the CFO that we need to go to Hartford and get revenue, when we're being told what our working conditions are, when we work in them every day, right? I teach kindergarten at Truman School. I know what I'm working with every day, and I know what I'm not working with every day. I guess the last thing I want to say is I would simply ask this body, please stop allocating more money to New Haven Public Schools with no accountability. You gave them $5 million of our tax dollars. We keep paying more taxes. There's no accountability. We don't know where that money went. It didn't go into my classroom. It didn't go into my husband's classroom at Metro because he doesn't have heat and he didn't have air conditioning. And he was told yesterday they're out of copy paper. So until we know where our tax dollars is going, please, thank you.
Do you have a question?
Sorry.
Alder Marks.
Thank you. Oh, thank you. Thank you for all you do. I know you come regularly and you're really knowledgeable with a deep history. So if you don't mind my asking a few questions of you too.
Certainly.
So, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Please.
The first is, can you just share just for a minute, you talk everything is worse over the last 5 years in every metric. Can I hear a few of those metrics? Can you flesh a few of those out for us?
Certainly, yep. I'm gonna choose my words really carefully. so be patient with me if I hesitate. I experienced malpractice. I experienced treatment that is not in line with the policies of the Board of Education of New Haven Public Schools. And I followed the channels and mechanisms that are in place for New Haven Public School employees for filing complaints, requesting fair work treatment. And for that, I received worse work treatment, substantially. I am going to say carefully, I question whether some of it was legal, and I brought those concerns through all the channels. Lots of our collective tax dollars were spent investigating and defending employees. I asked through FOIA to see the tax dollars that were spent, and I was told that the city does not keep records of that, which is concerning. The folks who are responsible are still working in New Haven Public Schools, still doing what they do. The person whose life was disrupted was mine. And I think this is important because I heard one of the Elm City Montessori teachers speak about the police contract earlier. The police contract includes overtime. We as teachers do not get paid overtime, but our entire work is based on overtime. So when a teacher is moved from 5th grade to kindergarten, my entire body of work is gone. I have to start over again. When I'm then moved from kindergarten to 6th grade, my entire body of work is gone and I have to start over again. When my classroom is closed and I move to another school, my body of work is destroyed and I have to start over again, over and over and over again. And materials are never provided. So go and spend $150 every time you go grocery shopping. Go and spend $150 once a month for your classroom because nothing you had from the year before is applicable. So that's one way. It's incredibly demoralizing to know that this is the system and that as a taxpayer, I can't even be shown where my money's going and why we're spending millions of dollars investigating management, defending management, and then making settlements with management, but we can't pay to fund our classrooms. I mean, legal fees alone. So that informs all of it, if that helps.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you for listening.
Jennifer Graves, followed by Mark Furlong. Good evening.
Good evening.
Name and address for the record.
Jenny Graves, 22 George Street, North Haven. I'm Vice President of New Haven Federation of Teachers. I've been a teacher in New Haven for 16 years. Tonight, I'm going to be reading testimony from a New Haven resident, New Haven teacher who couldn't be here tonight because she is doing student-led conferences. Dear Board of Alders, good evening. My name is Melody Gallagher. I'm a Ward 25 resident and live at 22 Barnett Street, apartment D21. First, I'd like to take a moment to thank the Board of Alders for putting together this workshop and seeking out public testimony on this matter. I've taught in New Haven Public Schools for 20 years. I currently teach visual art at Wilbur-Cross High School. I know what it's like to be expected to teach without having all the resources necessary to meet educational goals. I know what it's like to spend hundreds of dollars of my own money every year on supplies for my students in my classroom. And I know what it's like to watch dozens upon dozens of teachers leave every year because of issues similar to mine. Fiscal decisions directly impact student learning and teacher retention. I am here tonight to say that there are many resources, and it is my opinion that they're not always effectively spent. As a resident of New Haven and teacher in New Haven Public Schools, it has been frustrating for me at times to be told that there's not enough money for supplies to teach students in my classroom, while also watching fiscal decisions being made, approved, and money spent in ways throughout New Haven Public Schools that do not impact students or reach classrooms. And it doesn't have to be this way. Line item budgets, whether they have 5 lines or 5,000 lines, can still hide how money is spent. And yet I am here helping to advocate for a public line item budget for New Haven Public Schools. A public line item budget could allow for much greater transparency. As a district, we should have nothing to hide. It shouldn't be that, unless you know the right questions to ask, that you get the full picture of how and where money is allocated throughout the district. The public, residents of New Haven, and all school employees have the right to know how each dollar is spent, and they shouldn't have to be financial experts to access or interpret it. It is in part because of this that I would hope that when a public line item budget is crafted and various categories are considered, that New Haven Federation of Teachers has a seat at the table. It is my hope that you will advocate for an NHFT member to be on the working group that will be created. I look forward to hearing the conversation around a line item budget for New Haven Public Schools continue and unfold. Thank you for formally getting this started.
Thank you. And if you're able to leave those with our staff, we'd be most grateful. Mark Furla, followed by Laura Cunningham, or Cunningham. Hello, everyone. Good evening.
Good evening.
Name and address for record.
Mark Furla, 32 Chambers Street, public school parent, Hankston freshman in high school. A lot of good points were made. I have a couple of questions I want to ask that I don't necessarily expect answers to, but maybe somebody can get back to me at some point. From what I heard, I believe that the budget book may be loosely synonymous with the line item budget that we're looking for in a lot of cases. This is a question I don't want to answer. I am certain that somewhere there are rules that compel the Board of Ed to bring the budget forward. I don't know whether that, I think I heard Superintendent Negron say that part of that is just kind of past practice and tradition. I suspect, I hope that there are more. I don't know whether that's municipal statute, I don't know whether that's state statute, I don't know whether that's Board of Ed bylaws or any one of a number of other things. I think it's worthwhile to understand that because whoever creates that probably has the ability to change that and dictate what form that budget comes in. I don't think we're asking anybody to do us a favor here. I think we're looking to, certainly I as a citizen, am looking for those of you who we have empowered to use that power effectively. One of my great frustrations with our entire society at this point is people who have power are not using it in many, many ways. And so I do think that we have some ability here at the local level to change that. What we're talking about, I think in a lot of ways, is a power imbalance. There may be statutory or code things, but many of us, President Walker left, have a lot of experience negotiating contracts. And one of the things that we do when we negotiate contracts is we get the budgets to open up. We get people to show us. That power imbalance is playing out. Superintendent Negron can survey us till the end of time, but I can't answer those survey questions effectively if I don't have the information that they do. I guess the other thing that I would want to close on is accountability. I think that when I hear the CFO say that these documents have been, in many cases, and I'm paraphrasing, I'm not trying to put words in his mouth, have put together with bad information, that they're inaccurate. Someone made those decisions. Someone approved that document, maybe for years. And I don't want to paint that over, right? I feel that all too often we paint that over. We see a lot of bad decisions get made, and while they may occasionally be addressed, sorry about me, what I want from those in power is to use that power and to create accountability. My last thing is, it's not, we talk about the Board of Education. I think that we are doing the community a disservice if we do not refer to it as the Mayor's Board of Education. The mayor appoints the majority of those people. This body at varying times has chosen not to reform the charter to make it a wholly elected body, and the mayor still sits on it. And so, although there's a lot of control in there, a lot of this is on the mayor. If someone can get me answers to those questions, I'd love it.
So that would be me. And what I heard you ask about was what rules or regulations require the Board of Ed to provide a budget in a particular format? What do those regulations require? Could these be changed? Is that a fair summary?
Basically, yeah, right? I'm sure there's something that is compelling them to do that, and I'm just want to know who's accountable. Somebody is.
Thank you, Mr. Verla.
Thanks, gang.
Next on the list is Laura Cunningham, and then, okay, and then Leslie Blateau.
So I'm Laura Cunningham. I'm a special education teacher at ESUMS, and I'm a Hamden resident. Teachers are expected to share with their admin their lesson plans, data on student progress, and so much more. We must be prepared for unannounced walkthroughs of our classroom while we are teaching. All of this is described to us by our admin and the district as accountability measures. I am here because in return, New Haven public school teachers and the public deserve the same level of accountability from the district. We deserve to know how our public dollars are being spent in our schools, and we demand that the district produce a line item budget. I have sat in on almost all the negotiation sessions as our union fights for a fair contract. You may know that the board tried to prevent the union from having observers, another example of wanting to keep things hidden. While our negotiation team has consistently shared well-researched presentations and relevant data with the board, we have yet to be given anything of the sort in return. The board shows up late, unprepared, not having done their homework. We are told the district and city simply can't afford our proposals for dignified wages and affordable health care, but we have yet to see any figures or information that supports those statements. No one has. Alders, I ask you to ask them to furnish the real data for you to review. The board says they can't afford our economic proposals, but they want to add 15 minutes to the school day. Board, do you plan to pay teachers for working during that extra time? And if so, how can you plan to pay for that and not the well-deserved salary increases we are asking for? Further, throughout the negotiation process, the city has cited dramatically differing costs of the state partnership plan, providing the union with no analysis or data, no facts or figures. The costs cited to us by the city over the phone, they were not present in person, range from $600,000 to nearly $10 million. We did, however, ascertain the fact that the city has been getting millions of dollars in rebates from pharmaceutical manufacturers and not using those rebates to offset our high insurance costs. By the mayor's own admission, this is a practice that has been going on for many years, and we are only now aware as a result of our union pressing for more affordable health care. Alders and members of the press, I hope you'll look further into this and help to shed light on what's been happening here in the dark. Teachers are a drastically underpaid profession, and I don't think anybody in this room would disagree. And I'm wrong to believe that teachers' health issues should not be a source of income for the city. You, our elected officials, and all residents of New Haven deserve to know how our public dollars are being spent so that we in turn can hold the district accountable for their role in educating the children in our community. We want a line item budget because we care about our kids, our schools, our work, and our community. We believe you want the same. Thank you for your advocacy.
Thank you very much. Questions from colleagues? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Leslie Blateau, and then Zania Collier. Or Zanaya Collier. Zania. Thank you.
Sure.
Good evening. Name and address for the record, please.
Good evening. My name is Leslie Blateau. I live at 410 Greenwich Avenue in New Haven. I'm the president of New Haven Federation of Teachers, longtime high school social studies teacher, and the parent of a fifth grader at Hill Central School. This is a work in progress. This goal of a transparent line item budget dates back to before COVID. This was a goal of ours before Mayor Elliker became mayor, before Dr. Negron became superintendent. When we received COVID funds, kind of took our eyes off the prize of that goal. But now we're back to the season of deficits and cuts and layoff threats. And I want to tell you, even though there appear to be maybe layoffs coming, but even though there were no layoffs this past cycle, it is unacceptable to be an employee in an organization where we endure layoff threats year after year. It is not good for the teachers or the students who experience those layoff threats, even if they are not laid off. The stress and uncertainty interferes with teaching and learning. Not only that, it leads to teachers leaving the district, which should be a concern. More than 50% of our members in a survey that was administered in May of this year do not believe that teacher retention is a priority in the city. Not only that, only 95 teachers out of 1,775 have worked in the city for 25 years as teachers. 5% of current teachers have chosen to stick it out as teachers in the classroom. That is an alarming statistic, and it's something that we must address. In our current contract negotiations, we're trying for tuition reimbursement. Nope. Residency incentives. Nope. I remember discussing it 3 years ago with you. Residency incentives, because you talked about the old days when teachers and students lived in the community together. Hourly wage increases for our after-school work and summer school work.
1 minute.
Thank you. Supplies reimbursement. Nope. Hazard pay for working in unsafe buildings. Nope. And those were rejected because there's no money. But yet, how do we know that there's no money? I want to trust the people in charge, and I do trust the people in charge, but I am accountable as an elected leader to the 1,775 people who are relying on my leadership to negotiate living wage increases for them, to ensure they have affordable health care. And how can I go back to them when my employer does not give me the tools to make the case in either direction? It is incredibly alarming, but here is the solution. A line item budget, which the good news is the board has expressed interest in our contract negotiations to put an agreement to a line item budget in our contract. Great news. And a budget working group where NHFT has a permanent seat at the table. They did not appear to want to agree to that in our contract, but you can fix that.
Right.
I always keep hope. I'm a teacher. I'm an optimist. I believe things can get better. That's why we keep coming back. Thank you for your work. Look forward to working with you on the budget transparency working group.
Thank you, President Plateau.
Thank you.
Alder Miller, question.
Thank you for your testimony and your advocacy. I wondered if you could speak to this issue of the prescription rebates. What exactly is happening with that? How is that revealed? And what do you think the implications are for the budget?
Yeah, thank you for that question. So typically in negotiations, both parties bring proposals, and then both parties discuss the reasons why they can or can't engage with that proposal. Initially, one of the reasons why the board was not able to engage with us on our proposal to shift our members to the state partnership plan so that we could have high quality, affordable insurance was because it could potentially cost them $600,000 more a year. So we went back and said, all right, well, what number could you live with? Because we had some wiggle room with our cost share percentage. What number could you live with? They went to caucus. They came back and they said, actually, there's something else going on. And the city consultant said, this is a program that I started, and he was proud of himself. And he said, we collect prescription drug rebate revenue, and the city puts it into their revenue. And the city can't afford to lose that revenue if you were to shift to the state partnership plan. At that time, he said it was about $8 million, with about half coming from the Board of Ed. We have since seen one chart that was presented as evidence that was significantly less than that, only about a couple million. Then we've heard most recently, and he referenced the city website. I couldn't find it. I admit I spent about 5 minutes. I didn't look very hard. Most recent number was $9 million. So it's alarming because then, as the board is trying to, do the work of negotiating, which is important, and finding a way to get us to want to stay on the high deductible plan, the consultant said that they would offer us significant deductions in prescription drug costs. ultimately making more of the prescriptions that we would get in our plan free. And he said, I know how hard teaching is. My wife's a teacher. And it would help you if you could access some of the medicines that you need for the stress at a lower cost. And I just find it so insulting and really alarming that a healthcare consultant who is ultimately helping the city reap benefits off of prescription drugs is making an offer at the table like that, rather than ensuring that our hardworking members can just go to the doctor in the first place, access therapy for no copay in the first place, and not try to push free drugs on us to ultimately help us accept a contract.
Thank you. Further questions from colleagues? Alderman Marks.
Thank you. Thank you for all you do.
If you wouldn't mind using the microphone.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you. Thank you for all you do. I certainly am hearing and understand that years of frustration, perhaps even duress in your working conditions. I heard what seemed like a very sincere presentation by a new team, a newish superintendent, certainly a new CFO. I heard them state that the absence of, if I heard correctly, the absence of line item budget was a past practice and a mistake at that, with errors, rife with errors. And I heard a statement that there was going to be change. Two questions. Is that what you heard? And what are your feelings about what you heard?
I have heard tonight, and as well as in meetings, both negotiation meetings and meetings with Dr. Negron and Mr. Hernandez, that yes, the goal of the current leadership in New Haven Public Schools is to reduce a line item budget, and I believe that. I believe that is the goal of the current leadership to do that. I mean, we don't have a contract yet, but they indicated interest to say, yes, we can potentially put in the contract that after the board approves a budget, the line item budget will be posted on the school's website. What worries me, so I believe that, and I trust and respect Dr. Negron. What worries me is how Mr. Hernandez described his experience interfacing with the budget that was posted for maybe a couple days or a week for this current year that now has been retracted, and that's too hard to make sense of it, so we're just going to move forward. That worries me. So I believe that is the goal, and I am concerned about how we're going to achieve that goal if currently things are so muddy and confusing and filled with errors that we are not able to repair that.
Thank you, Ms. London. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Alderman Marks. Further questions and comments? Seeing none. Thank you for your testimony. Thank you. We'll now have Zania Collier. Zania. And then Joshua Glab. I wonder if one of my agile colleagues might see if there's a sheet over there that could be fetched. Okay. Very good. Good evening.
Good evening.
And address for the record.
My name is Zania Collier. I live at 220 Munson Street, New Haven. I'm a history teacher at Co-op Arts Magnet. I'm a history teacher at Co-op Arts and Humanities Magnet High School. I have proudly dedicated 22 years of my life to the students of the New Haven Public School District. I'm before you not just as a teacher, but also as a mother of three who were educated and graduated from this district. I am a New Haven taxpaying resident and a lifelong learner and an expert in my field. I hold a bachelor's degree, 2 master's degree, a 6-year degree, and I'm currently pursuing my doctorate. I say all this because I have invested heavily in my own education to ensure I provide the absolute best for New Haven's children. Unfortunately, I do not feel that the city of New Haven is invested in me. I'm here to express my profound disappointment and frustration with the current state of the teacher's request for the state partnership plan. Just this past Tuesday, our mediation session lasted 8 hours, stretching until after midnight. Despite this effort, the city continues to refuse to move on the SPP, claiming they just can't do it. The city just can't do it. Why? Why do the numbers from the NHFT and the city not align? Why do the numbers they provide keep changing? Why are we debating whether funds exist when the city and the district should be publicly sharing what funds are available and how the money is actually spent? The Board of Education current offers regarding our salary and working conditions demonstrates a fundamental lack of understanding and respect for the hard work teachers do every single day. We're being asked to accept less while the city and NHPS make economic decisions without transparency. It is unacceptable that we're facing 2025-26 school year without a published line item budget. Year after year, we see millions of dollars allocated to vague titles such as transportation, other contractual services, and overtime benefits, other. Meanwhile, those of us in the classroom are struggling with unfair salaries, rising health care costs, unimaginable class sizes, deteriorating building conditions. For example, this past April, my classroom temperature was often 90 degrees or higher. What made it worse is that we did not have windows that open at co-op. So the 5 fans that were in my class just blew hot, stuffy air around and made the students more miserable and lethargic. Why weren't funds swiftly allocated to fix these ridiculous working conditions? Why do I have to work so hard to submit complaints in addition to all the work I dedicate to students? It shouldn't be like this. I am living proof that the sentiments that we feel that the district doesn't prioritize veteran teachers. When you undervalue experienced educators, you're not saving money, you're driving away the stability and expertise of our students that our students deserve, which financially is an irresponsible decision. Thank you for listening to me, but I just want to say, can we please, if you cannot, we cannot pour from an empty cup. So please ensure it's both filled and that we can see what's in it. Thank you.
Questions and comments? Seeing none, thank you for your remarks. And if you're able to leave those sheets with our staff, we would be most grateful.
I emailed.
Oh, that's fine too. Thank you so much. Joshua Glab and then Dario Soltzman. Good evening. Name and address for the record.
Thanks for saying my name right.
Well, I lucked out.
That's 2 ways to throw people off. First off, just thank you. Transparency has been needed for a long time.
Name and address for the record.
Oh, sorry. Thank you very much. Joshua Glab, and I live at 221 Foster Street, just down the street from Miss Festa. And I've been teaching in New Haven for 5 years now. I'm a science teacher. Just so you know, I do get emails from other districts on a regular basis trying to recruit me to come to a different district where I would get paid more. And honestly, like right now, it's been kind of tough being in New Haven. And a lack of trust is part of that. And so I thank you for asking them to help improve that. What I'm going to do though, real quick, is read you a letter that's written by another teacher who I think says it better than I do. So bear with me as I read that. Good evening, members of the Board of Alders. My name is Teresa Purdy. I am proudly taught for 22 years at Cooperative Arts and Humanities High School. In that time, I've helped hundreds of New Haven students learn financial literacy, how to budget, plan, and make responsible choices. Tonight, I'm asking the city to live by the same values we teach our students every day: transparency, accountability, and respect. Unfortunately, what we've seen from the Board of Education and the city during the contract cycle has shown the opposite. First, transparency. Educators, parents, and residents deserve to know where the money goes, how funds are allocated, and why key needs remain unmet year after year. Instead, we get incomplete numbers, last-minute documents, and shifting explanations. That's not transparency, it's a trust problem. And when those responsible for guiding our children's education can't provide a clear financial picture, confidence in leadership disappears. Second, respect.
1 minute.
For months during our teacher contract negotiations, the district came to the table unprepared. No data, no proposals, no understanding of what actually happens in our classroom. Meanwhile, educators show up early, stay late, and use our own paychecks to buy classroom supplies. That's not partnership, it's disrespect. The city cannot claim to value education while treating educators as negotiable line items. And third, honesty. About the decades of insurance rebates the city has quietly collected, the rebates generated from premiums paid by the city unions have flowed into the city's budget without disclosure, transparency, or benefit to the workers who funded them. If my students did that in a class exercise, they'd call it unethical, because it is. This isn't just a budget issue, it's a moral one. For 22 years, I've devoted my time, resources, and heart to city's children. I'm deeply committed to my work, my school, and my students. But commitment also means speaking up when systems are broken. Thank you, guys.
Thank you for your testimony. Would you be able, with that person's permission, to email that to our staff?
Yeah.
I can do that.
Bless this guy.
And we'd be grateful to have that. Oh, you already have it? Well, then
There you go.
Any questions from colleagues? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Daryl Soltzman, followed by Paul Garlinghouse.
Daria left early.
Okay, Paul Garlinghouse. One more time, Paul Garlinghouse. Okay, and
Jordan.
is their last name? Jordan.
Jordan Month.
Is Jordan, okay, there you go. Name and address for the record, please.
Jordan Bunting, 555 Winchester Avenue. So I have to speak on the time that I used to be a substitute teacher in New Haven Public Schools. And I believe that there wasn't much support, especially through how budgeting went. So what I ended up doing was quitting and becoming a security guard to make more now than I would have if I was a full-time teacher. And then my next goal was to become a police officer in the city of New Haven, which would also make me make more than if I was an entry-level teacher in the city of New Haven. So I always sat back and asked, what makes the superintendent, CFO, deserving of the salary that they make for a failing school district, as well as their failing students, as well as the people that actually do the work within the city. So what can they say that will show me, other than its standard practice, that makes people feel confident in their ability to do their job? And that's all I have to say, just to keep it brief.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your comments.
Is there anybody else from the public? So we've come to the end of the sign-up list. That's all the people who signed up to testify. But if you haven't signed up, this is your chance. If you wish to testify on this topic, please come forward. And for a second time, if you wish to testify on this topic, now's the time. Come forward, please. And for a third time, if you wish to testify on this topic, please come forward. Seeing none, a motion is appropriate.
Mr. Chair, I make a motion to read and file this item.
Close the hearing.
I make a motion to close the hearing.
Second.
The motion's been made to close the public portion of this meeting. It's been seconded. Discussion of that motion. Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, please say nay. The public portion is closed. Alder Hunza.
Mr. Chair, I make a motion to read and file this item.
Second.
The motion has been made to read and file this item. Discussion. This is an opportunity to say a few words about the topic. And so colleagues are invited to get on the queue to do that. Who wishes to speak? Alder Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think it's encouraging that we're hearing commitment to a line item budget of the type that would be appropriate for the school district. I also think, given everything else that we've heard, it would be very helpful, as we recommended initially, to have a structure for some more oversight and engagement from different parts of the New Haven Public Schools constituency, including the Board of Alders going forward. So just wanted to underscore my support for that. We'll take that up at a future time, but appreciate the committee's engagement on this issue.
Thank you, Alder Miller. Further comments from colleagues? Alder Festa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It all sounds promising, everything that was said tonight, but until I have it in hand, I won't believe it, only because we've been promised this in the past, and being someone who has served on the finance committee for the last 12 years, we keep hearing the same thing and we keep asking for the same thing, and we want it this time, and if we don't get it, we need to demand it. When we look at our own budgets at home, we want to see where every penny is going so we can make sure the lights are still on and our bills are paid. And I think that's a fair thing, not only to the residents of this city, but to our kids, to our teachers, to the staffing that is entailed. And I'm gonna trust that what we heard tonight is gonna come to fruition, and that we will see this line item budget come March, when we as a finance committee, or some of us here tonight as the finance committee, but we all vote on this budget, we'll be able to actually see numbers. And also, Mr. Chair, through you, I am very concerned about, and again, because we serve on finance, I've never heard about this rebate with the prescription drugs. Did I miss that conversation?
No, there was no conversation before this committee about rebates, but it is something that I'm happy to talk with colleagues about. It's actually a fairly commonplace practice for employers to do that. It's part of the business of how PBMs function, and I have a fair amount of knowledge about it, so we can talk about it at another time.
Yes, with that, Mr. Chair, and also, regarding the state insurance plan that we heard about from the teachers, what is is there a loss? Again, we don't need to, these are just questions that if I don't ask them now through you, and we don't have to answer them tonight, but what are we losing out on the contribution if we go with the state plan?
Well, I think colleagues who might have interest in the conversations happening in the teacher's contract could certainly try to find out about it, but it's not directly related to this item, so I don't know that I would follow up on that. But having heard people's questions about it, I think we should note that what happens in those negotiations is really important to the city, and we want that process to be successful. And if colleagues are interested in learning more, they can.
Thank you. And I just have one last comment, because the state delegation was brought into this conversation, and we all know that the state delegation for New Haven is probably one of the best in Hartford. And they fight for not only the residents of this city, but for our teachers, our kids, everybody as a whole. And when they come to us and say, look, we're trying to get more money on the state level, but we don't know where the money is being spent. So in order for us to be able to get more money, we need a good argument. We need the ammunition. And if we provide them the ammunition, perhaps we can get an increase in the educational cost sharing that our kids deserve. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Alder Festa. I see Alder Walker-Myers. Oh, wait a minute, Alder Redente, and then Alder Walker-Myers.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Madam President. I just want to echo my colleague Alder Miller's sentiments around a structured working group with stakeholders from many different parts of the city around this school budget, and we'd be happy to be a part of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder Redente. Alder Walker-Myers, and then Alder Punzo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's always hard to sit and hear about all the different things that's going on in our school system. And with the understanding that we know, like, it need to be funded. And I think it's really important that we actually take the time to identify what the real problem is, because we constantly talk about whether the state is doing enough or not. And we know we have a really strong delegation that fight for us. But the reality, when you're fighting up there and you have 150 other towns that don't agree with urban education, don't care about it, don't care about transportation and none of that, you're fighting like a losing battle up there. You know how we need 16? You're gonna need some votes too up there. So they do the best they can. And I don't think anybody ever minimizes that. I think we all take it a little bit, because it's hard. But I think that we have to continue to make sure that our residents are heard. We already heard that it's possibly going to be a line item budget that people will be able to look at. I'm a little confused whether we'll have that on March 1st or not, because I didn't hear that. I just heard they were working on it and they'll have it. So I don't want to be sitting here expecting March 1st because I'm not sure. So through you, Mr. Chair, maybe you could clarify that. And I want us to understand too, that as alders, we can always bring somebody in this room before us, and we have to, even though we might not want to sometime, have to recognize that there's a Board of Education board too, right? Okay. That they have to be compliant to too. So when we're making proposals and ideas about stuff, we should be having a conversation there too to make sure everybody is covered and everybody is heard. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Alder Walker-Myers. Next on the queue is Alder Ponzo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Being in education my whole life, I know where my heart is, being on 4 strikes and 5 pay freezes through my career, which were necessary. But the frustrating part for me, not that I've ever been involved in negotiations, you hear from one party a figure about what something costs, and you hear another party, and we really, at least for me, you don't really know who's saying the right things. In order to make judgment, to accept the contract, to make decisions, I think you really have to know the truth. Now, where that comes from in negotiations, I know it's a power play on both ends. I don't know. But that's the frustrating part for me. And as far as the structured working group, I thought I heard, might have been from Ms. Plateau, about that is part of a negotiating item maybe that the Board of Ed wants to do. No? Okay. Yeah. But anyway, I think that needs to be looked at. I think it needs, but that could be not easy to do, when you have a large group. I think the concept is a good concept, but we have to make sure it's going to do what it's supposed to do. So thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Alder Ponzo. Any further discussion from colleagues before we vote on the motion? Alder Marks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm picking up on something that President Walker-Myers said about, we have the superintendent and her, leadership team here with her, and that they're accountable to the Board of Education. I was thinking about that a lot tonight. I was thinking about sort of the silos of these different organizational actors. We've got the leadership team, we've got the Board of Education, we've got us, not that I can tell anybody where they should be or I have an expectation, but just, I don't think any members of the Board of Education were here tonight to listen. And I just sort of,
Dr. Jordan.
Yeah, we're
Oh, I do correct that. So Dr. Brennan was here for some time, but just thinking about, thank you for clarifying that. He's a friend and a constituent. So I meant no disrespect to him. But just sort of thinking about the silos we're in and sort of, what opportunities there are as the Board of Alders for us to have this kind of dialogue and this kind of conversation with the other, institutional actors. Because it seems like it's a tough situation. And I think that, it's hard for us to interchange with the leadership of the school system to then have them account to the Board of Education when we all need to be coming together to try to solve this and to have the same clarity and the same facts on the page as Alder Ponzo suggested. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder Marks. Further comments from colleagues before we vote on the motion? I'll just say for myself, I thank our 4 colleagues who submitted this item and gave their presentation at the outset of our meeting for initiating this conversation, which I think has been fruitful. And I agree that moving in the direction of a line item budget for the Board of Ed would make a meaningful difference. I thank everybody from the public who came and spoke or who came and listened. We're glad that you were here, and we also appreciate how near and dear this topic is for so many of us in New Haven. So, a motion's been made to recommend that the Board of Alders read and file this item. It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, say nay. The motion carries. We will recommend this item be read and filed. and we'll be sure to inform the community on next steps.
Alderman Punzo.
I make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Second.
The motion been made to adjourn, it's been seconded. Any discussion of that motion? Seeing none, all in favor of adjournment, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, say nay. The motion passes. We are adjourned.
Lord.
I didn't hear it.
Holding back that.
You caught it. Yeah, I didn't hear it. I just heard it's one of these. But when the Messiah comes, you never know. Because the person, people that is speaking, that's why I made the suggestion about this from that other. Yeah, it's here. They're not even here. I gotta go. Good luck, guys. Are you okay? Yeah. Oh.
But thank you.
Why this is not turning off?
You should see the other guy. You should see the other guy.
I don't, it's not working.
No. Is this?
Oh, there we go.
It's Frankfurt, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
I thought I was early.
Madam Chair, I'll take those.
This timing's not bad.
Oh, no,
I told my family, so I'll see you at 11:30.
my night is not over.
Good luck. All right, so I guess we're gonna need to follow up on the $1 million question of, and then we can expect this. Budget book?
I will introduce 220 million.
Oh, there you go, there you go. But not the line of budget. The budget.
Well, it's gotta be a line item budget that is accessible to the people. And
That's my
that's,
definition of line item.
so, but that's on